Congratulations, you've just been born, you've got your whole life ahead of you, and you can do anything you want with the time that you have. The only issue is, you've been born on Nirn as a mortal. Being a mortal who will die eventually isn't too bad. I mean, it's better than being Daedra, where whenever you climb out of that evil god goop for the first time, you have to select which evil god you want to work for the rest of eternity. Being a normal mortal sounds great in comparison, but another issue is that you live in a world that is constantly at threat from both supernatural and political forces, both of which are gunning to change the very fabric of reality. But before that happens, you and plenty of other people are gonna get got. On top of that, depending on the time and era, it's honestly easier to end up in a terrible afterlife than it is to end up anywhere nice. For every sand behind the stars, there's like 5 hells for you to enjoy until the universe gets reborn yet again. And those heroes who saved everyone but you from the apocalyptic event that got you down here in the first place are making sure the universe doesn't get reborn either. Landfall be damned, the Empire is sending their best. Because you still gotta pay your taxes, does not matter if the world is currently on siege from demons. So, given the circumstances, it makes a lot of sense that a mortal such as yourself would strive to live as long as possible, forever even. For the first time in this scenario, you're in luck, because when it comes to immortality, you've got options. Our first selection of immortality brings us to magic. All immortality will involve magic in some way, shape, or form, but in this section, I mean just clean, pure magic, not influenced by evil gods or any gods, although some may be still a little goddish. You gotta, cut me some slack here. Magic is just an all-around good way to become immortal because there's so many different ways to do it. Why not stuff your soul inside of a gem or jar and become a lich? Sure, there's downsides, but there's plenty of upsides to being a lich. Like, it makes you aggressively immortal. You can be killed over and over and over again and be perfectly fine as long as wherever you stored your soul isn't destroyed. Sure, there are downsides like you'll probably end up a skeleton man at some point, but I'm sure there's people who see that as only an upside. Being a lich makes you so immensely powerful, it's pretty nice. Hell, if you're good enough at magic, you might be able to create an entire mini pocket dimension in your soul storage compartment. Wait, what? Well, if that guy did it, then so can you. If lichdom seems like a little bit too much work for you, then maybe becoming some form of undead, but retaining all your faculties was good enough for you. Sure, being undead isn't really being alive, but it's not that bad. It's close enough to being immortal. Lord A-Slip managed to do this somehow by being a Solstheim Draugr, and not only remaining a powerful mage, but staying completely sane and sentient. And he's not even evil. He's a good guy, actually. If being a skeleton or zombie man isn't your vibe, then don't worry, good old mortal magic still has some ways to help you out. Just being a master wizard seems to extend one's life by a lot, although it doesn't stop the aging process. You may stay a hardy 31-year-old wizard for a few hundred years, but when you hit that 900th birthday, don't be surprised if you realize you started graying and got crow's feet around your eyes. It really does seem that just holding some sort of master level of understanding and control of magic extends your life, as we see many mages throughout the series to be far older than anyone normally would be, and they never mention their discovery of immortality. And again, they still do age, just really slowly. Still, you might age, but seems like a pretty good deal to me. Read enough books, cast enough spells, and you'll outlive your children. Now, who wouldn't want that? It's not to say that everything I just said about that was 100% true. There's likely some sort of actual magical attempt to live that long that you need to do, but it's just so common for master mages to do this, so no one even cares or sees it as anything stand out. So if just knowing that much magic and being able to use it doesn't actually fully extend your life, and you really do need to do something, it's evidently so normal and easy for a master mage to do that you might as well just come naturally. There have been some total anti-aging magics attempted, but to differing levels of success. Gyron Vardengroat, the legendary sage Breton mage, managed to halt his aging completely, but in the end he didn't know which of his many potions did it. Despite the fact that that was the whole point of the project he was working on, I guess he got mad after it wasn't working for a while and must have stopped taking notes while mixing more potions. But hey, it means there is a potion out there that can do it. You just gotta figure it out for yourself. Now, there is a less nice for you way to go about becoming magically immortal. You could end up just like the Augur of Dunlane, a mage at the College of Winterhold who wasn't a master and really had mostly a talent for restoration magic of all things, still somehow managed to turn himself into this. And mind you, this was not the goal of whatever experiment he was working on, this just accidentally happened. Now he's a mass of magical energy, but he's still all there in the head, so it's not so bad. And on top of that, he now seemingly has a crazy amount of knowledge in his form, and that leads me onto a little tangent. So the only other time in the Elder Scrolls we see the term augur used in this way is in ESO with the Augur of the Obscure, a goofy-ass being with a massive amount of knowledge on almost anything and everything, and thanks to the good old Psijic Order, he has to tell you the truth no matter what when asked a question. The only issue is you have to ask him directly. You can't just say, tell me everything. You gotta know what you're asking for. And of course, he claims to be from the adjacent place, a mysterious and just downright insane realm that we know very little about, where things like Cityface reside. And even if you don't know what or who Cityface is, you can just sort of look at this depiction and say, yeah, that place is probably a little weird if this guy lives in it. So I guess this means that augurs are just beings of great wisdom and knowledge, or maybe, mind-bendingly so, it might mean that you have a connection to the adjacent place. Now, does the augur of Dunlain have a connection? I don't know, just an idea, mostly because I wanted to mention the adjacent place. Finally, there's Glomoril, an ancient artifact or spell mentioned first in Arena of all things, and has only briefly been talked about ever since, although still briefly throughout the entire series. It was made by the legendary mage Shalador, who apparently stole the secret of life from Akatosh and used it to make Glomoril. We know next to nothing about it, but it can definitely make you live a long time, among other things probably. There's more ways to become immortal within mortal means. There's apparently some magical plants that can make you immortal and some other stuff. Hell, you can even turn yourself into a celestial being. But to go beyond mortal is probably where most people are going to go if being a lich is too much for them. So our next stop is... the evil guys. Well, to start off, we have vampirism and lycanthropy. Now, vampirism is obvious. Vampires in all media are immortal, except, like, I don't know, that one YA novel series, I guess? That's all I can remember from reading it. Well, guess what? They're immortal in this series, too. Shocking the masses. So why become a vampire? Well, there's ups and there's downs. Some of those downs being, well, there's about 1 billion vampire clans on Nirn, and all of them act differently from one another. So while becoming immortal by being a vampire is easier and faster than discovering the arcane secrets to life, you might just end up getting stuck with a very shitty type of vampirism. Sure, join Skyrim's Volkihar and have the sun only drain your powers by a lot, and well, I assume it still hurts. I mean, listen to that sound effect. But you also get a crazy transformation, or be lucky enough to end up joining the clan of the first vampires, with the head being literally the first vampire, and get 0 downsides and only upsides and become incredibly powerful. Or you might get bitten in Cyrodiil and just die in the sun like any other type of vampire. Wow, so cool. Yeah, you might have to end up spending the rest of your life in a cave for 90% of it. Werewolves, on the other hand, I didn't think were immortal or anything until ESO's Dark Heart of Skyrim storyline, where an army of werewolves and vampires join together, and the fact that they're like better than mortals and should rule over them because they're immortal. But like that dude in the companions in Skyrim is an old man and a werewolf, so really I don't know, but let's just go off the idea that yeah, some can be immortal, because sure. Anyway, there's a hearty handful of different types of lycanthropy, and honestly, your biggest problem, unlike vampires having the chance of being really shitty and a potential eternity in Cold Harbor if you're killed, your biggest problem while being a werewolf or wereboar or any other were creature is just Hircine coming to fuck with you. Just like ruining your life for the sake of the hunt or whatever his weird goal is. Oh, what is that? You're trying to live a normal life? You're not killing enough people? You're not hunting enough in the name of the god of the hunt? Okay. Ruin your life. Boom, you ate a child. That's his modus operandi. The Daedra can make you immortal in weirder and more directly Daedric ways, let's say, by turning you into a vestige. Vestiges are basically Daedric copies of non-Daedric beings. All sorts of things can get turned into vestiges. Dragons, animals, and most importantly, you. You can never truly die because you're like a Daedra now. When somebody kills you, you just come out of the evil goop like the rest of the Dremora would. Only issue is most people are more likely to end up a soul shriven rather than a cool, unkillable, normal person. No, see, most people who are going to get turned into a vestige, even if they still have a good handful of their faculties in place at the beginning, will eventually just end up becoming basically a hollow undead from Dark Souls. Still immortal though. But who knows, maybe you're just built different and you'll be fine. Another odd way is binding yourself to Oblivion, or well, a singular realm at least. It's like becoming a vestige, but probably a lot harder and with less pling pling plong. As far as I know, we only have one example of this, and it's our favorite feathered demigod elf, Umaril the Unfeathered. See, Umaril was the direct champion of Meridia, and there's a big difference in that than just being some Joe Schmo with a Daedric artifact. Just getting Mehrunes Razor may get you called his champion, but he doesn't really give a fuck about you. He just wants you to off people with that artifact. No, a real champion is someone who is close to a Daedric prince. You've got their favor and their power. The Navarine and Indoril Nerevar were champions of Azura, Miraak was the champion of Hermaeus Mora, and Umaril was like that, but for Meridia. These two were real close, and when Pelennor killed Umaril, he had one last trick up his sleeve. Somehow Umaril had his soul bound to her realm and got reborn in the evil Daedric goo like any other Daedra would. So get in good graces enough with a prince, and maybe you too can have all the benefits of being a vestige without being a vestige. And finally for Daedra, while I'm sure there's a few more examples I could bring up somewhere, there's one that sort of bugged me ever since I saw it. In ESO, there's this one quest where you help out a Telvanni wizard by getting her to be immortal. And you do that by getting her in contact with a Dremora who can just grant that wish like a genie. Of course, with the catch that one day he'll come back and drag her to Oblivion personally. Very devil at the crossroads of you. But yeah, sure, this Daedra is called the Duke of Black Covenants, but like, he's still just a Dremora, so what's so special about this dickhead? Guess some Dremora and Daedric princes just got that kind of power. I mean, sure, why not? After all, the smallest scamp is like 1/1 billionth of a god, so sure, some big-wig Dremora can be a genie. So sell your soul and become immortal until further notice. But speaking of gods, we have our last segment here. Ah, who doesn't love some good old Godhood? This is probably the best kind of immortality a mortal like yourself could ask for. Plus, you get powers and a church. There's a saying, a phrase you hear a lot of people say when talking about Elder Scrolls lore and about gods, and that's, if you can convince enough people you're a god, you'll become one. Which is true, but they make it sound a little too easy and a little too simple. When it comes to ascending to godhood that way, it's not as easy as it sounds. We aren't talking about starting some small cult in the mountains or anything. You can't become a god by being the Elder Scrolls Jim Jones. No, you need to be Elder Scrolls Jesus. You have to convince a lot of people of your godhood. And along the way, you'd probably become a god for some other reason with how long it'd take. I mean, dude, running a cult is no easy feat, especially when there's just gods who live on Nirn already. Like, actual gods. You're gonna convince the Wilder King's followers that you're more worth their time than him? And that leads us on to our next method of godhood and everyone's favorite, mantling. Now, I don't want to get too deep into the walking ways and that level of dusty lore, where half of it is just stuff that fans generally agree upon based off 3 lines in an in-universe book. So let's not worry about stuff like this and stuff like that, for now at least. That's a whole other video altogether. So mantling is the act of becoming so much like a god that you and the god become indistinguishable and in turn become one being. Sometimes this can be a very lengthy process, and other times it is a very fast one because it's integral to how the god works. Like with the recently mentioned Wilder King, for example. The Wilder King, or Wilder Queen, is very often mantled by a new mortal, taking the position every now and then. So the process is pretty fast and simple. Now, it's important to note that this isn't just a position that a mortal takes over. It's the melding of one being with another, a god. So yes, it is a drawback if you wanted to live forever, because you are also now a completely different person, but I mean, the original you is somewhere in that mixture. We don't know many of the specifics of the past events of mantling, but our best visual of it is in Oblivion's Shivering Isle DLC, where famously at the end of the DLC, you become Sheogorath, which seems like a short process, but really ever since the moment you step foot in the DLC, the process had already started. Every step of the way, you were becoming more like him, you know? So you still want to be immortal and you still want to be a god, but don't want to go through the whole becoming a different person process, which is understandable. Well, there's still another way. Well, there's a lot of ways, but the way I'll be talking about is probably the most straightforward of them. Get good. Seriously, just become so powerful that you become a god. Why not? Seriously, who needs Chim? Who needs mantling when you can just do what our old little pal Manamarco did and just become such a powerful magic practitioner that all it took was getting the Mantella, a super powerful and important artifact, to push him over the hill to go from super powerful wizard to divine being. I mean, he just did that. Like, it just happened, man. Which, while straightforward, is also probably easier said than done. Okay, I hear you. Becoming a god has a lot of weird ins and outs, and all the other ways sound really bad or hard, and you just want to live forever and not have to read books or strike up a deal with the devil. So I give you my last best option. Divine Servant. Yeah, why deal with worshippers and prayers by being a god when you can just do a god's bidding and still get to live forever? Sounds like a good gig to me. There's plenty of examples of immortal servants to gods, but the one I want to talk about is the Drake of Blaze. See, during the time of ESO, the Imperial City was just completely fucked up by Molag Bal. That's a problem for a lot of reasons. One big one being is the dragon fires are there, and that's important. Of course, the dragon fires are out during ESO because there's no Dragonborn Emperor and there's a full-scale Daedric invasion going on. But if the brazier that holds the dragon fires were to be destroyed, well, I don't know exactly what would happen, but it'd probably be bad for the future. Luckily, our fair lady, the Drake of Blades here, gets to become the guardian of. She gets imbued with the power of the dragon fires and becomes an immortal guard to protect the brazier until a new Dragonborn Emperor comes along to relight the fires. Which sounds like a nice gig until you think about how, she's probably not allowed to leave the room ever, so it's kind of a give and take. Not to go back a topic, but Nocturnal does a very similar thing with the Twilight Sepulchre. Except for that, well, you gotta die first. So as long as you're okay with guarding a room for eternity, you might be the perfect match for the job. Now, obviously, there's other examples and other ways of achieving immortality. Hell, there's new ways to do it in like each entry of the series. But I think that's enough for now, and with that, the video is over. You should follow my art social medias because please, for the love of God. And anyway, I'm out of here. Every video game series has cut content, scrapped ideas, and unused assets. Minecraft Beast Boy. Fallout New Vegas, well, apparently everything that was ever planned for the game was removed. Grand Theft Auto. Hot Coffee and Nico's Gloves. For some reason, seriously, Rockstar, why'd you even cut these out at like literally the last minute? This is borderline false advertising, if not literally false advertising. Anyway, with that being said, this of course means The Elder Scrolls 2 has cut content because yes, it too is a video game series. The series has gone on for a long time, probably longer than you think. Yes, The Elder Scrolls is older than Fallout by a few years, unless you're counting Fountain of Dreams. So of course, the long series has a hefty collection of unused assets and scrapped concepts. We've got missing cities, unused areas, scrapped plot lines, planned mechanics, and my favorite, entirely scrapped games. We've got more than one of those. Some of these almost made it into the game, while others never made it off the big whiteboard in Todd Howard's office. I'm gonna break these down game by game, even if this does result in some games having a lot more to talk about than others. Alright, let's get on with it. Elder Scrolls Chapter 1 Arena went through quite an interesting development cycle. The game would start out as something completely different than what it would become and what the series would evolve into. I wonder if they had any idea what they were creating in the middle of thumb-ass Maryland. Little Mary Did You Know shit, you know? You guys have any idea your baby boy would get a mobile game? Well, yes, starting from the very inception of the series, this is the first scrapped idea. And it's probably one of the most famous Elder Scrolls concepts that went unused. It was just the entire original game of Arena. You guys ever look at the series' titles and get a little confused why the first game is called Arena, meanwhile the rest are named after the settings of the games? Daggerfall is named after the Kingdom of Daggerfall. Morrowind is set in Morrowind. Oblivion, while being set in fake Italy, has you going to hell pretty often. And Skyrim is set in Skyrim, meanwhile Arena is just Arena! You'd think it'd be called Elder Scrolls Chapter 1 Tamriel. Well, this is all because the game started out as a very basic non-RPG game where you'd play as a warrior fighting in arenas all around the world. But famously, they'd slowly add more RPG elements to the game during development, and it eventually got to the point where they dropped the arena plot altogether and changed the whole thing into the game that we would come to know and have most people skip over because it's old. Side note, you are incredibly weak if you can't handle Arena's old jank. I mean, come on, get with the program here. Funnily enough, after all was said and done, there were no arenas in the game at all. Instead of changing the name, they just slapped an RPG-sounding title to the top of it and called it Elder Scrolls Chapter 1 Arena. Literally, by Bethesda's own admission, the name at the time meant literally nothing and it just sounded right. It appears they basically did this because they didn't want to hire another graphic artist to draw up a new logo for a new name. Although, that being said, the location naming convention the other games follow did start right here because the writers came up with a clever little line where it said that Tamriel was so violent, the whole continent got the nickname The Arena, which of course was, you know, never referenced again outside of the first game in any of the other other games except for one line 3 games later. Never change, Elder Scrolls. Never change. This next part has been something I've wanted to talk about for a long time, but have you ever just wished there was a console port for the earlier games? I know a lot of people beg for the first 2 Fallout games to be brought to Xbox. I'm sure someone outside of me wants to play this with a controller, and well, that was actually gonna happen. Yes, there was 2 planned releases for Arena for the PS1 and the Sega Saturn. Unfortunately, these 2 ports never came out, but we did get some cool-ass looking Japanese gaming magazine articles and unused box art for the ports. The box art for these unreleased Japanese ports being done by the late Yoshitaka Tamaki, best known for his work on the Shining series. My favorite thing about this art is that it continues the tradition started by the real Arena box art by featuring a bunch of characters that don't actually exist, that were just made up on the spot. ESO seems to be carrying that torch, I suppose. I really wonder how the series would have changed if these ports did come out and, well, did well. The series wouldn't come out on consoles until Morrowind was released on the Xbox. Maybe it would have made them get rid of the amazing combat of Arena that they put into Daggerfall, but who knows? Small thing to mention is that somewhere between Arena being a fantasy RPG that we know today and the gladiatorial combat game it started as, there was a planned party system for the game that seemingly included permadeath, or, well, at least a very harsh looking texture for representing your companion going down. People don't really talk about this, but Bethesda didn't really do companions in any of their other games up until Skyrim, and with Skyrim being said, I would say more until Dawnguard released, where they said, okay, well, what if we made like a real character that people liked? Oh, they even made fun of the idea of companions existing in Oblivion. It wasn't their bag. I mean, it feels like they begrudgingly included them in Fallout 3. This next part is our first scrapped game, of which, yes, there's more down the line. This somehow flew under my radar for a long time. I only found out about it while reading lore articles on the toilet. For Daggerfall, there was Elder Scrolls Chapter 2 Mournhold. Sort of. See, the original idea for Arena was that they were just gonna make tabletop RPG style expansions for the game, all having different chapters of the same larger story. This too ended up being a scrapped idea. They played a lot of D&D while making the first 2 Elder Scrolls games, you gotta understand that. There was a good handful of ideas floating around during Mournhold's planning stage, and yeah, it seemed that no matter which way they went with the next step in the Elder Scrolls series, the main idea was to take a section of the massive map and zoom in on it and fill it in with extra detail. The game was gonna be a gothic horror-ish game, probably based around the weird-ass description the city of Mournhold has in Arena, where it says some evil lurking under the city was driving people crazy. What did they know? But I mean, yeah, they also said it was the lost capital of the First Empire, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. We're just saying shit back then, like, what was his line about Argonians? Like, goddamn, bro, calm down. He canceled it and went on to make Daggerfall because the humans in the setting were more marketable to a general audience than Dark Elves. Oh, how little they knew. It's interesting to think about how this would have played out. You know, the first 2 Elder Scrolls games are kind of infamous for having quirks of generic fantasy and just stuff that doesn't align with later concepts in the series, especially Arena. But when you actually play them, most of the time it's easy to look over, if not, you know, chuckle at some of the weird stuff. But I feel like a game like Mournhold would probably be where that doesn't work, where you can't just ignore it. The game being about Mournhold and the Dunmer within, it'd probably be pretty hard to write around or just ignore some of the ideas that probably would have been solidified in that game. Because it's easy to ignore the Dunmer being referred to as Drow in one line of dialogue, or Magnus being referred to as a legendary super mage rather than the god of magic he'd later become, if Mournhold was actually made into some gothic horror setting about some lost First Empire and the evil lurking within it. I imagine it would be hard to change and steer us away from that and into the Morrowind we'd get in the future, if not impossible. Morrowind is many things. Gothic is not one of them. Oh yeah, and to cap off the Arena section, Arena had some cut monsters and other stuff, including Cyrodiil actually having stuff to do with it other than the end game. Yeah, look at the rest of this stuff. Woo, there it is. And with that, let's take a look at the real Elder Scrolls Chapter 2. Researching Daggerfall has been kind of a pain. There's just so much unused and scrapped stuff, but like 99% of it is just really small little bits not worth talking about. Like, I can't just sit here and go, guys, did you know that there is an unused animation of some royals waving a sword around? Crazy, right? I can't do that. Despite what my views may say, I'm not a Fallout channel. I'm not about to spend my entire life milking cut content, but I was able to dig up some interesting things from the mountains and and mountains of unused textures. Daggerfall originally had much smoother animations. For the time, its animations are fine, standard really, but obviously they're just a bit simple. I mean, guards just kind of float at you while shimmying around. But as you can see, a lot of the animations were originally made to be super smooth, but were cut due to hardware restrictions, you know, tale as old as time. Some of these just feel like too smooth at times. On a related note, I found out while looking at these that there was originally going to be horseback NPCs. You can ride a horse in first person, but nobody else does in the final game. Another cut feature was, well, having some amorous adventures alongside being a spy. This isn't at all surprising. Daggerfall was a very nude game. And I don't just mean that because without clothes and armor, your character has they boobs and or sinister shadow balls out. I mean, just like in general, you go into a church or something and there's always like a sprite of a topless woman, and there's also a lot of oiled up buff guys as servants. I'm just saying. We still have the unused text for engaging in these recreational activities, but what we don't have is the unused art that would have accompanied it. Yeah, apparently Todd Howard, the Goon King of Tamriel, has that shit under lock and key, or at least he did like 20 years ago. It is unfortunately unknown if he still has the tasteful, in his own words, artwork with it. Alright, we have two little technical bits. Daggerfall was originally planned to include multiplayer, and apparently with a kind of large number of players too. Although I'll assume it was large for the time. This was of course cut, but it was hotly pursued by project leader Julian LaFay, who eventually got it working in the multiplayer in Battlespire. And you were originally also supposed to be able to port your arena character to Daggerfall. Because, you know, D&D, because everything back then was based on D&D. They literally used D&D campaigns to come up with lore and world building for the Elder Scrolls. This was eventually cut because they realized it was kind of useless and also complicated. Now, let's get on to the big thing. The planned Daggerfall follow-up, the Elder Scrolls Chapter 3 Tribunal. Now, theoretically, I should include this in the Morrowind section, but the original plan felt way more Daggerfall-ish than what it would eventually turn into. The game was going to be set in the Somerset Isles and revolve around some powerful elven kings called the Tribunal. Obviously, this would turn into the Tribunal of Morrowind over time. There's more little bits of ideas in this that would eventually turn into actual lore, like the Sigic Order and their island, the concept art of something that would later turn into a Clanfear, and, you know, etc. Although, apparently, all of this was to be inspired by Arthurian legend and, Harry Potter of all things. Late 90s sure were an interesting time. Even more interesting than the 90s as a whole. This whole game was supposed to stem from Morriga's wedding quest in Daggerfall. Yeah, this main quest, side quest, listen, Daggerfall's main quest was built a little weird, was going to be the keystone that would bridge the plots of Daggerfall and Tribunal for some reason. This isn't even a retroactive thing either. That was the purpose of the quest being in Daggerfall, as far as I found. It was originally written into the game from the start to lead into the next one. So when you're doing Morriga's wedding quest, you are doing a prelude to a game that doesn't exist. It's an interesting thought, although again, I think like with Mournhold, we're much better off with the game we got. One last thing, because I have nowhere else to put this in the video, and this was all the same era of the Elder Scrolls series. Redguard had many planned sequels, famously the Eye of Argonia, but also a game set in elsewhere called Paradise Sugar. God, it just makes me so mad that Redguard flopped. Apparently, Cyrus as a character was really liked by the old Bethesda crew, and they wrote a whole bunch of stuff for him. But people, you people, didn't like Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, so we'll just never get any of that. You bastards made Bethesda's Group OC a forgotten relic of a character, and I hate you for it. Goddamn, the last time they acknowledged him was for Black History Month, for a Twitter post where they made him look 20 years younger and gave him a completely different haircut. Oh yeah, and you can like steal his fit in Skyrim Anniversary Edition for some reason. Anyway. Morrowind being, of course, the weirdest and most esoteric of the Elder Scrolls games, comes with some of the least crazy cut content and ideas. You'd think there'd be some deep, dark cut content or some lost, legendary idea that just got thrown away for some reason. That's not to say there's not some weird and esoteric stuff coming up this segment, but our first piece of cut content is a bunch of voice lines they never implemented. Ones you've probably heard already were all of the cut lines for Yagrim Bagarn, which I'm glad they cut out because as funny as it is, like, it takes away from him, in my opinion. Listen, guys, I know the Elder Scrolls community loves to do the funny Discord, Reddit mod jokes and stuff, but he's a cancer-ridden old man with dementia. When you talk to him, it's only during his moments of clarity, and he is the last person of his entire civilization. These cut lines just literally made him the Discord mod joke.
A visitor? What brings you to visit Yagram Bagar, Master Crafter, and last living dwarf?
They are funny, though, so I do still kind of like them. Personally, my favorite is Fargoth reading the intro narration for some reason.
In the waning years of the third era of Tamriel, a prisoner born on a certain day
should be sounding like Lucan the Third. And of course, the cut line of dialogue you might not even have ever realized isn't in the game. The legendary Daggerfall line, "Have you brought the false copy of Sunder?" does not exist in game. Because this false copy doesn't exist either. This was a weird planned dupe of Sunder you were supposed to be able to run into and I guess possibly bring to Red Mountain and get laughed at. It's really odd when you think about it for a sec. How would this have impacted the plotline? Why was there another Sunder? Why does Daggerfall know about it? And what the hell does false copy mean? How is something an illegitimate bootleg? Morrowind was supposed to feature originally a progressing blight. There would have been areas that would have been taken over by Daggerfall and his forces. There would have been armies patrolling areas, entire cities that were supposed to fall during the main story, and the plot was going to feature all of Morrowind and House Dres. Due to the game being in the new 3D engine, this scope and scale simply weren't meant to be. So they reduced the amount of real-time armies and, blight, and also took it away from all of Morrowind and just put it on Vardenfell. And this leads me into the most interesting section of the Morrowind segment, if not the whole video. Morrowind was a big step in the series, and even saying that is a little bit of an understatement. Not only was a game of this scale going to console, but an open world, fully 3D game, too. To top that off, the series was about to step out from its generic fantasy skin it had already started shedding in Daggerfall, and everything was about to change and get a lot more French-inspired, if you get what I mean. So there was a lot of pre-release screenshots showing off the game as it was coming together. And this shit may look archaic to some, but at the time, this was the future. I've seen a lot of these floating around for a while now, and well, the further you go back, the weirder they start to get. At a certain point, it ends up feeling like a creepypasta. Here, as we start, you might notice that there's just a different vibe, a certain different je ne sais quoi, rather than the one we got in the final release. I think the lighting looks different, but as you keep going back, the screenshots start featuring old textures, some cut armor, and like the original look for the Ordinator armor. Here we can see the game was originally a lot more saturated. Morrowind is certainly a game with color, no doubt, but these original textures were hitting Halo Reach forged juicy color filter levels of color. The old armor textures too just feel a lot more cartoony, for a lack of better words. The whole game has a different, less oppressive vibe than we would get later in development. Now, on to my favorite. These screenshots. I don't think I even need to explain what's wrong with some of these. I've seen them for so many years, and nobody really talks about them. They'll be like talking about Morrowind in a video, and they'll just slap this in the video and not even mention how wrong or weird it looks. There's just something so ethereal about these, because anyone who's played Morrowind can immediately see these are not real. They are downright nonsensical in certain aspects, like everything going on in this one. Nothing about this one is right. And this one is just, I don't know how you could even look at this one and put it in a video without noticing something is up. This looks like a Zelda game with how it's presenting the Morrowind shopping experience. A far, far cry from the simple menu we got at release. Thankfully, finally, while researching this video, I got the answers I was looking for. These screenshots were based off of concept art done by Michael Kirkbride. So these are basically just in-engine mock-ups, but they're still just so odd. It's like Morrowind from another universe, and it's kind of sad some of this didn't make it into the actual game, because as much as I love the Elder Scrolls, the games have always lacked a certain level of presentation to them, a certain level of panache. They're just very utilitarian in a way. Do you need to have an NPC drive you around in a gondola? No, so we don't get that. No gondola, but Bethesda, maybe I want that. Maybe that's for enrichment. Anyway, I had thought I had seen the end of weird early Morrowind screenshots until I found these. These screenshots are from some Elder Scrolls Lost media. Apparently, they're from some proof of concept mini-movie showing off a Morrowind market. It wasn't a game at this point, basically just just a 3D movie to show people off what the art direction should look like in action. Now this is what I meant by creepypasta. This gives off the goofy, fake-ass, do not search Mario 64 and Zelda builds. And I mean that. This shit literally straight up looks like an N64 game. Everything is just so early in concept, but it's still clearly Morrowind. I guess Michael Kirkbride's DNA is just that strong. Feels like the JVK assassin's gonna be somewhere in the back of one of these screenshots. We don't have any footage of this lost proof of concept, but we do have the screenshots. Safe to say, I don't think any of this made it into the release game, seeing as this literally wasn't a video game. There's also like 2 other screenshots, likely another set of mock-ups in the same style as the proof of concept movie. Still rocking the weird ethereal vibe. But yeah, I think that wraps up this Morrowind section. We got 2 more to go. Oblivion has some of the most normal instances of scrapped stuff. A lot less lost Elder Scrolls Morrowind 64 looking ass shit, and just more missing cities. And yes, of course, I am referring to Oblivion's probable most famous piece of cut content, the City of Such. The city was removed and demoted into an old rundown fort. This is so famous because the cut must have happened fairly late into development, because you can see an old version of the Oblivion map on the start screen, and bam, there it is, just sitting there like it actually matters. I can't find much of a reason why it was cut, so we can assume it just comes down to the idea that it's probably just unneeded. I don't know. This isn't the first or last time this has happened, and it'll probably happen again in the future. Elder Scrolls has a myriad of cities that just go either missing or get turned into something else. There's still bits left over from when Such was a city, and that's with a few notes left about the NPC, Azan, being from Such. It was supposed to be involved with the Such Fighters Guild. Damn, they stole his city and his job from him. They didn't erase its city status from the lore though, and you can go to it in ESO while it's still an actual city with people in it. The more interesting and large piece of cut content was the arenas. One of Oblivion's best quest lines is the arena. It's just some of the most fun you can have while beating up prisoners with a pig named Porkchop. Turns out though, it was originally meant to be bigger. There was supposed to be an arena in every city rather than just one major one in the Imperial City. We can actually see 2 of the cut arenas via some behind the scenes videos, although our looks at them aren't too clear, although we can still make out some detail. Honestly, it's kind of hard to imagine where they'd fit in, and the 2 we can see, they just kind of feel so blopped there. Although I suppose that's just because I'm so used to the actual game that came out. Moving away from cut content for a section onto scrapped ideas, Oblivion was supposed to have a much different vibe. Oblivion was supposed to be very Kirkbridean in its design, much like Morrowind was. Paraphrasing from the quote I can remember, it was supposed to be a jungle, a very thick jungle that was bubbling with ancient magics where you couldn't walk 10 feet without accidentally stumbling across an ancient elven ruin. Just plop in the middle of that were Italians for some reason. Apparently, according to some people, Todd Howard watched Lord of the Rings and he said, fuck that shit, we're doing this. Whether this is true or not, is up for debate, just like, Michael Kirkbride doing 50,000 grams of who even knows what and writing lore. Now, some people say that like, oh, damn, Oblivion, it got super like genericified in its aesthetic and that's so sad. But I disagree. I think if everything was so Michael Kirkbride like, it'd be too much. I like that each province, each culture is uniquely weird in their own way, and they're not all just weird in an old French comic artist mixed with Eastern religion way. So yeah, you know what? I am glad that Todd Howard said fuck that shit after watching Lord of the Rings, even if Morrowind is the cooler looking game. Okay, to pad out this Oblivion section, this was also on the cutting room floor. I just felt I needed to mention this, that Goon Howard almost stroked again. Apparently the female characters in Oblivion were almost topless just like they were in Daggerfall. But this time, we have the textures, yes, but not only do we have the textures, they're still in the game, yeah. They're just blocked by the underwear. So, I mean, technically it's not cut content, but you can't see it under normal means either. I mean, we even have the Dremora. The Dremora had boobs. Okay, now on to some real shit again. Oblivion's original story was actually going to revolve around the secret plot set up by Yeagar Tharn, the villain of the first game. These weird secret plans have been sprinkled throughout the other games, mostly the spin-offs, and have yet to actually be paid off in any way. And apparently we were going to get a conclusion to this in this plotline. The only issue is it never happened. I think it's a neat idea to revisit an old villain's plans, especially with the weird mysteries set up in the spin-offs, but I think that's where they probably should remain. I made a whole video about Tharn's weird plans a while ago if you're interested. The whole main mainline game being connected to another villain from another mainline game idea just feels weird. Like, it'd be taking away from Arena's story in some way. But it'd be cool for another spin-off. Basically, Bethesda, make another Elder Scrolls Travels game and my life is yours. Speaking of, there was supposed to be another Elder Scrolls Travels game, and it was supposed to be for the PSP. Yes, another canceled game, and you've probably heard about it. It's Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion, and it's an awful name because it makes people think that this game was supposed to be just like a port of Oblivion to the PSP, which no, it was not supposed to be. It was supposed to be a side game, god damn it. It was not meant to be some fucked up condensed version of the main game like the evil ass Java Oblivion. This game not coming out makes me so upset. Oh my god, why does it not exist? It would have been so cool, guys. It was going to be a level-based RPG inspired by Metroid Prime's gameplay, set like a little bit after Oblivion, like I don't know, like 5 minutes or something. Or maybe during it, I don't know, I see conflicting information about it when I read. The craziest part about this game is that we have a sort of playable build you can download right off the internet right now, guys. I mean, yeah, it's mostly an unfinished broken mess. But like, come on, look, you can actually sort of play it. It's interesting. We don't have any other playable versions of any other canceled games, so yeah, I mean, this is the best we're gonna get. You're not gonna get playable Mournhold anytime soon. Now, we just have no idea why it was canceled, and it wasn't canceled before it was announced or anything. This wasn't something we had to uncover years later in some data leak. You could have pre-ordered this shit on Amazon in 2008, and yet they still canceled it. Oh yeah, and apparently during the development of Oblivion, they also pitched a game about colonizing the fucking moon. Okay, side tangent there, I guess. Okay, this video is a long one, so let's move on to our last section. And no, I'm not going to talk about ESO because I assume there's 10 billion different things that were cut in early development because fucking MMO. Anyway, moving on. Skyrim has plenty of cut things like, small things. Like we found an iron staff in the files, and it seems that maybe there was going to be Morrowind-style staffs, whatever, in the game at one point. And oh my god, why did they cut that out? But that's besides the point. So yeah, we just got a ton of small stuff. So I'm going to be covering just the 3 biggest things. 2 of them being the original plan for Skyrim's story and the pit. This is going to be the shortest segment we have by far. The pit is a famous cut area of Windhelm, which would have acted as Skyrim's version of the Imperial Arena, but it was a lot smaller and a lot dirtier in a sense. Less glory and fame and more underground blood sports kind of, vibe going on here. This was almost finished before it was cut. I'm pretty sure there's like a lot of it left in the files. So people have known about the pit for years, and there's been many mods to bring it back, and they don't even do much. They basically just turn it back on. As far as I've read, I don't think we really even know why they cut the arena out. But here we are, 2 Bethesda games with finished arenas that were just removed from the game anyways. I really hope this doesn't happen again. I mean, there was even a basically unused fighting arena in Fallout 4. Bethesda, just release the goddamn thing. Please, what are you doing? Ship an arena already. You've done this like 3 games in a row, basically. Goddamn, Blades at least has an arena, but you can only fight real other people in it. But I mean, hey, that's something at least. Now, if only it was ported to PC. Now we have the original plot of Skyrim. This was to have the famous warrior emperor Uriel Septim V be the main villain. To have him return from Akavir with an army of dragons to take over the empire, which is now not run by the Septims. A lot of people look at this and they say, wow, that's really interesting, but I'm really glad we didn't go with this plot. A ton of people say that this dickhead might have been theoretically cooler than the Alduin we got, but it would have completely spoiled the ending to Oblivion. Having a Septim be alive ruins the gravity of Martin's sacrifice. It's not just sad that he's gone because he was nice. It's important because there's no more Septims. There's no more dragon emperors. It's really important that he was the last one. So yeah, your guys' Dragonborns being like lost Septims in your own story is also stupid, sorry to say. A hot take. You can do what you want, but I don't like you. So I think Alduin was just a better choice overall, even if he's not as cool as a villain as, say, Daggerfall, and was outdone in his own game by Mirak. I really need to make a video about Alduin because my Elder Scrolls Villain series has 2 videos in it. I'm gonna get around to it, I promise. And finally, Skyrim was going to have a lot more small towns featuring an arena like Granite Hill, but for one reason or another, these places were removed, and another entire city got the such treatment again. The grand, the elegant, the honorable city of Snowhawk was originally the westernmost city-state of Skyrim, as seen in Arena, but of course, it got downgraded to, again, an old fort ruin. Unlike such, where we have a 3D experience for it in ESO, Snowhawk is currently entirely bound to Arena, and that's the only way we're going to see it as a city for the foreseeable future. We don't know what happened to the city in lore either. It was just kind of abandoned at one point, and I guess crumbled down to the point where it's only a tiny fort left, but I mean, hey, it has a jail. I mean, that's more interesting than like a lot of the other bandit forts, at least. And hey, at the end of the day, at least it gets a ruin. At least it gets something unlike Granite Hill. And with that, this video is over. Oh my god, I didn't realize this one was going to be so long. If you're still watching, thank you. You should follow my art socials, and if you want to support me in the channel, maybe commission me or preferably, honestly, sub to my Patreon for exclusive perks. Yeah. In the script, I have a sunglass emoji. See ya. I'm out of here. Well, I'm back with another Elder Scrolls video. You know, I had an entire video related to the future of Fallout in Bethesda. Thought it was pretty well timed with the whole big boom in Fallout hype, thanks to the show. Yeah, but Microsoft just had to come along and ruin everything. So now my video would have seemed really weird and maybe even in poor taste, with how I talked about things before it all happened, of course. So here I am now recording a different video. Alright, that's enough hemming and hawing about how Microsoft decided the gaming industry wasn't in bad enough shape and decided it needed to make things worse, and make everyone who works under Bethesda's lives a little bit harder. But what am I talking about today? Well, I would say as the title suggests, but honestly I have no idea what I'm gonna title this thing as of right now. I'm not exactly sure how to word it. We're gonna be looking at Elder Scrolls stuff that isn't video games, but not like merch, no, like actual things related to the series. You know, like books and tabletop RPGs and who knows what else. Basically, I'm not gonna be talking about t-shirts that say, "Thank Talos, it's Fredas." And let's have a look at some Elder Scrolls stuff that isn't in the video games, but isn't merch, but I mean, it's still technically merchandise, but just bear with me. Yeah, you thought you could contain the raw, sheer power that is the Elder Scrolls on a disc? No, the series overflowing into the tabletop genre was destined from the start. The only issue with that is that none of them have been very noteworthy, and also some of them have been pretty unstable in their release. Starting with the first Elder Scrolls tabletop, Elder Scrolls Call to Arms. This game is a war game tabletop where you can control troops of whatever your wallet can afford to go through crazy story scenarios, and yeah, that's basically all there is to this. The story, as far as I can gather, isn't anything crazy, if there even really is much of one at all. The notable things about this are all the stuff surrounding the game. Elder Scrolls Call to Arms was made by a company called Modiphius Entertainment, a company that seems to specialize in making licensed tabletop games for notable IPs like Dune and Star Trek, and namely, for us here, also other stuff for Bethesda with Fallout. There's an underlying theme that you may notice with all the Call to Arms stuff I'm showing you on the screen right now, and yeah, all of it is just Skyrim. I mean, hey, it's a reasonable starting off point for the set, because as much as more hardcore fans would wish it was Morrowind or something, Skyrim is the most well-known and most played Elder Scrolls game to date. Now, this wasn't going to be much of an issue for long, because Modiphius announced plans to make a version of Call to Arms based around Oblivion and ESO. And man, it would have been kinda really cool with Oblivion and ESO, and especially with ESO, because you could build up a crazy diverse scenario of characters and settings. I mean, look at all the miniatures they produced just for Skyrim. Now imagine that with all the weird, crazy-ass, batshit insane stuff that goes down in ESO. Look at these, like, land pieces. Imagine that, but for the settings of Oblivion. Yeah, you could get this in the White Gold Tower. You were going to be able to create something really neat here, and maybe even convince your weird-smelling Warhammer friends to play with you. I mean, hey, it's not like Warhammer fans have ever actually played Warhammer, so this could be a good introduction to the genre for them. There's only one issue, and, well, it's that the ESO and Oblivion versions haven't come out yet, and, Elder Scrolls Call to Arms came out oh no. Yeah, seems like we aren't getting many updates to this in the future. They still sell all this stuff on both Amazon and the Modiphius storefront, and you can play a demo version of the tabletop in Tabletop Simulator, of course. But yeah, I guess the economic decline that started in that year for some unknown reason to me may have halted productions to continue this product in the future. The evidence of the lack of continuation that's coming to Elder Scrolls Call of Arms becomes a lot more concrete when you look at our next tabletop that was released just last year. Skyrim the Adventure Game, released by Modiphius. Yeah, it's so over, Call to Arm bros. Millions must play Skyrim the Adventure Game. Okay, so like, what is this? Well, Skyrim the Adventure Game is a 1 to 4 player narrative-based tabletop RPG with seemingly just a lot of effort put into it. I mean, Jesus, this is really a real RPG. You know, apparently, unlike the last one. This game, as you can tell by the title, centers around Skyrim, of course. The story is about a group of ex-Blades who are on the run from the Thalmor, but I swear to God this is a different plot from Elder Scrolls Blades, I promise. See, this game's story takes place actually over a long time, getting back to those early Elder Scrolls roots, goddamn. So don't worry, you and your party have plenty of time to do mini-quests and dungeon delves. There's multiple campaigns that all except the campaign From the Ashes seem to go in order. Once your party gets into Skyrim, a series of events is set off involving Boethia, Reachmen, the Civil War, and oddly, it would appear that you guys just lose. Yeah, the 1 to 4 Blades in this game get really humbled at the end of one of these campaigns. Not the final one, it's just odd. Because yeah, according to this UESP article, it says that at the beginning of the following Dawnguard themed campaign, you and your friends are freshly released from like 100 years of some sort of Boethia mind prison or something. Okay, cool. I mean, hey, you win some, you lose some. Your real beef is with this cult leader, not the god they worship in this story, I guess. I would go further into detail, but I won't lie, I've definitely not played, although I can tell you that From the Ashes has you fight a skeleton army, so yeah, this is pretty much peak gaming and also probably the best campaign, and I will definitely buy this in the future and make someone play it with me. But yeah, this one seems really a bit more up my alley than the last one, with it being a real RPG and all that. Now on to the next one that I'm a little confused by the whole scenario going on with it, I won't lie. This is Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era. It's a single and multiplayer tabletop in whatever style and genre this is. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the tabletop expert by any means. It's made by a company called Chip Theory Games this time and is centered around ESO, which was probably obvious given the name and especially the logo. Of course though, this isn't an adaptation of the never-ending crazy-ass plotline of ESO, but as per usual is set during the events of ESO. Yeah, I mean, hey, it looks really interesting. I really wish I could say more, but I don't know much more about this, about what I'm even looking at here. I saw this when it got crowdfunded immediately. I swear to God, it happened instantly after the announcement, but I could be crazy. Okay, so the weird thing about this, the weird thing about the Betrayal of the Second Era is, ever since its crowdfunding, I have not heard a single thing about it. I am looking at this stuff right now while recording this. I have no idea where this is going, when it's going to be out. It has like a vague date, I believe, but still, I haven't heard anybody mention it. Doesn't even have a UESP listing. I mean, that's the gold standard for Elder Scrolls stuff. Yeah, you're about as in the dark as I am on this. I mean, I'm sure it was probably going to be good, but no matter what it is, it's no hot dog bush. So with that, let's stop talking about nerdy tabletop RPG stuff and let's get into some real cool guy shit. Time to talk about... Oh yeah, having fun isn't hard when you've got your library card. So I'm not going to talk about something like the Elder Scrolls cookbook or anything because that would fall into the purview of just being merch. No, I'm going to talk about these. Oh yeah, you may have seen these floating around in the general discussion. What we're looking at here are the Greg Keyes Elder Scrolls novel duology. Yeah, fancy word for two. These two books are entirely canon to the franchise and are especially noteworthy for one big reason. See, these take place in the early 4th Fourth Era in the 40s. In the first 40s, as in the year 40 and the year 48 of the Fourth Era. So when I say early, I do mean early. But I mean, what's the big deal about that? We've explored the events of the Fourth Era set before Skyrim before, like in Blades and apparently Skyrim the adventure game. Well, see, Skyrim came out in 2011. Very iconic for that 11/11/11 date. Bethesda loved that one. You see, the first book, The Infernal City, came out in 2009. This book was actually our first introduction into the Fourth Era, and is our first introduction into some of the aspects of the Fourth Era that we would eventually get to see in Skyrim. Namely, that the Mead family took over as the rulers of the Imperial Empire, and that their version of the Blades is the Pentius Oculatus. You know, it took the Blades, like, so many years to finally fuck up and end up letting the Emperor die. It took the Pentius Oculatus, like, half that time. Legends, am I right? However, the second book actually came out a week or so after Skyrim, likely as a tie-in or something. I don't see a lot of people talk about this, and it's kind of important. This was our first taste of the Fourth Era. This is Skyrim's Fall of Reach, in a way, and is referenced in-game as where the tree that the sleeping tree sap comes from. As for the contents of the book, they are about a weird and mysterious floating island with an even weirder and mysterious city on top of it. As the island floats around Tamriel, it kills people and then raises them from the dead. We follow a group of daring adventurers who attempt to stop the giant floating murder island because, I mean, it's kind of a problem. I mean, you wouldn't want to get killed by a giant flying magic island now, would you? I won't spoil too much because you should probably just go read these, but what I will say is that the city on top of the island is called Umberil, and to the informed, that should already be setting off some ideas as to the origins of said magic floating death island. Yeah, and I actually own these, unlike Skyrim the adventure game, although I don't own what we're going to talk about next. Now, these are the Tales of Tamriel. Now, these are kind of straddling the line between what I'm supposed to be talking about and just plain being merch. I think they should count these are pretty different from an Elder Scrolls cookbook, so cut me some slack. So what are the Tales of Tamriel? Well, it's another duology, yeah, we're bringing that again, of books that are comprised of actually in-game books from mostly seemingly ESO, accompanied by art, of course. Here you can find everything from big lore articles to small notes left by mages and the like. Notably, I really like this note that Devaeth Fear left, where he's just complaining about magic shit. You can also read the Ruminations on the Elder Scrolls, an essay written by Septimus Sigmus around 900 years before he was even born, another certified Elder Scrolls classic. I'm not even suggesting that this was a mistake. No, this is just how the Elder Scrolls are. Reality and the flow of time in this world is more of a suggestion than a rule, honestly. I really like these. Ignoring for a second the very well done but very clearly digitally drawn concept art put aside, the lore here. While reading these, you're really getting the feeling that you're sort of pouring through some sort of Mages Guild archive, reading important documents and what is tantamount to a grocery list of a mage. And I know I just said ignore the art that was included with this a second ago, but you really shouldn't in the long run. This stuff's cool as hell, and it's really nice to have sort of just a collection of this stuff on hand. And I think this is the kind of stuff that separates them from being an Elder Scrolls cookbook, if you get what I mean. Only issue is, I don't own them. They aren't that expensive, but I also did just graduate college, so I'm immediately broke forever. Luckily, I can just harass this dude who does own them to let me just steal them from him for the time being and let you guys look at them yourselves. So take a look. Oh yeah, there's also just the Skyrim libraries, and I feel like nobody talks about these, which is odd because there's 3 books here over Tales of Tamriel's 2. Yeah, finally a trilogy. I know that's what you've all been waiting for. As far as I can tell, and I can only say as far as I can tell because it's usually even more expensive, it's basically the same as the ESO books but with stuff from Skyrim, so damn, do I need to spend some money at some point. I can feel Todd Howard staring at my fucking wallet right now because he knows. Todd Howard knows the envy I felt watching Camelworks Elder Scrolls collection video. I may not have the pewter Cyrus statue, but I can get these at the very least, right? Oh yeah, there's also the new survival guide to Tamriel, which as far as I know is about as important as the Elder Scrolls cookbook because I cannot tell you what is inside because I am not a big enough channel to buy things for videos yet. Yeah, there's no grand so I booked a ticket to Japan moment here, So this may be cheating, but this certainly isn't a video game. And I just didn't know when I'd have another chance to show this off and talk about it, so, yeah, you're just gonna have to deal. This is the Daggerfall Consumer Electronics Show Cinematic. The title alone of that should probably give away what this is. I'm talking about a promotional video made for Daggerfall at CES. This should be pretty important. It is Daggerfall's equivalent to Skyrim's You Should Have Acted trailer, but this is lost media. Oh yeah, it was only a matter of time before I got to this. Yep, someone ring the bell. Snowy City is talking about lost media. This right here is lost video game related media, and well, as per usual, I'm sort of lying to you. You can watch this entire video right now on YouTube. In fact, I'm gonna play it in the background as we are speaking now. The lost part is this is the best and only version we have of this video. Yeah, this grainy camcorder footage of a CRT monitor is the only footage of a CGI live-action FMV for one of the most important video games ever made. Who knows, maybe Bethesda has a copy of this, but I mean, who knows if they'll ever give up that tape, honestly. Some interesting things to note besides, you know, the obvious look of it. Mostly them mispronouncing Jaegar Tharn's name as Jaegar, but I don't care, I won't back down, it's Jaegar like Jägermeister. I'm gonna link the video below, but honestly, I'm just gonna play this in its entirety because I really don't think this is on any copyright detector radars, so here it all is in its stanky glory. The footage that makes Daggerfall seem like it's on the same level as a 90s entertainment game.
After the days of triva, the traitor Jaegar Tharn, where the Septim dynasty has ruled the land of Tamriel for 405 winter moons. Then the white moon Cameron, king of Sentinel, will shine dark on his mortal enemy, King Lysander, the dragon of Daggerfall. Though the dragon shall devour the moon, there will be no victory that will conquer. Sorcery, war, and forbidden action, shall bring terror to the alleys of the court of Daggerfall.
And with that, I'm going to close out this video and maybe look into getting these books. There's probably some other things I could have covered in this video, but I feel like I've covered the lion's share of the whole thing. Still need to come up with the title, so while I do that, you should follow my social medias. Anyway, I'm out of here. Oh boy, oh geez, Snowy's making another Elder Scrolls video. Yes, I am. I actually have a few ideas for videos unrelated to Bethesda because they still haven't put me on their payroll as their #1 defender, and I planned to make a vid out of one of those ideas this time, but I ran into a bit of a snag called college papers. Yes, unfortunately, I have to do those things too. So instead, you're getting a video about the Elder Scrolls' magic. Luckily, there's always something interesting to discuss when it comes to the Elder Scrolls. So what are we looking at today? Magic in the Elder Scrolls is not very well understood. Yes, it's extremely common in the world and has been studied and used by mortals since there's been mortals for it to be studied and used by, but it's still kind of just a great ocean of what and huh? Like for instance, it seems that magic comes from the massive holes that the god Magnus and his followers left in the sky. Those holes, of course, being the sun and stars, because these tears in the sky are holes straight into Aetherius. And so Mundus is constantly bathed in god light, which means everything is like at least somewhat imbued with magic. Like even the dirt on a scale of like 1/1 billionth is kind of magical. And that's all fine and dandy. But there's also seemingly the same magicka in Mundus as in Oblivion, so you know, that's kind of odd, like where's that coming from? But I mean, I guess Mundus is sort of like wrapped inside of Oblivion, so that could be the reason why, like, you know, it's eking into Oblivion as well as Mundus when it shines through the giant holes in the sky. But let's not get into the whole Mundus is inside of Oblivion or whatever that is about. Let's not open that can of worms ever. So what do you think happens when magic energy is constantly flowing out of the god realm and drenching your planet basically since its inception? Well, weird magics happen. The magicka that powers your fireball spell also powers Devaeth Fear to make female clones of himself who he's both the dads of and the husbands of at the same time. So let's get into that. Well, not the clone daughter wife thing, because I don't want to get into that, and I'm sure you don't either, right? Right, you don't want me to talk about that, right? Anyway, First up, we have auramancy. Auramancy is the magic of memory, but not normal memory, no, that's water magic. No, this is the memory of objects. You know, the classic, you walk into a dungeon and there's some ghostly people reenacting the past events so you can know what actually happened here. I think it happens more than a few times in Skyrim alone, but it's most presently seen in the quest in Skyrim, Unfathomable Depths, where some Argonian gives you a really cool looking cube. Yeah, that's auramancy. Not the cube, but the memories being acted out within the quest, within the dungeon. It seems that strong emotions and memories in the Elder Scrolls world almost leave a literal imprint on the physical world around them, especially objects in particular. Someone using an auramancy spell could get a lot of information on you by stealing some prized possession from you and getting to see all of the memories you accidentally left inside of it. But at the same time, a powerful auramancer, I guess, could pick an object and choose the memories and events to imbue within it. So in that case, the object might not even require any sentimental value, and someone could just pick up a spoon and go, ah yes, my entire life story is now inside this. But on the opposite side of that, it seems that sometimes that the actions and memories of what happened within a location are just so strong that it just sort of generates some auramancy on its own. And the memories sort of just play out without anyone in particular triggering it, like seen in Unfathomable Depths. But honestly, I'm a little confused on how the events of the quest were potent enough to make auramancy just naturally occur, but I don't know, like, the tongues defeating Alduin wasn't. Hey, I guess just what this Argonian dockworker does is just so much more potent than, you know, the founder of the Greybeards. But speaking of memories, you might be a bit confused by what I meant by water magic a minute ago. And I'm just gonna let my past self explain that. Apologies for the incredibly stanky audio you are about to hear.
Good. That's one less loose end.
Let's start with water magic. See, water magic allows its users to control water akin to some Avatar waterbending kind of stuff. It lets you use water as a weapon by controlling vast amounts of it, or just turning yourself into a magic fire hose. But there's a deeper power to it, because water in the Elder Scrolls is memory. And when someone dies, their memories and their knowledge of the world become water. So when someone has a true understanding of water magic, they have access to everything. They can know deep arcane secrets of long-dead mages and important political secrets of dead emperors, making a master of water magic insanely dangerous. Well, wasn't that fun? It wasn't fun for me because I had to listen to that old audio. But moving on from memories and waterbending, and let's move on into flesh magic. The Elder Scrolls has a weird thing when it comes to the idea of flesh magic. See, in a lot of the games, there are golems or Atronoks you can summon, or at the very least fight. And of course, these guys follow some kind of pattern. There's a fire Atronach, an ice Atronach, an iron Atronach, I guess. But there's also a flesh Atronach, which is different from a big-ass zombie, I promise you. It's more like a weird Frankenstein's monster who can be either weirdly athletic and acrobatic, or the complete and utter opposite of that. Either way, it's pretty gross. They make their most prominent appearance in Oblivion Shivering Isles DLC, where you get to build an even more giant one with some crazy lady, so it can guard the gate that will soon be yours, you know, once you become a god. So, I mean, who cares that there's some Frankenstein's monster that's in the same league as a fire elemental for some reason? I mean, there's also the Bone Walker, which just isn't a flesh Atronach for some reason. I mean, it feels like a flesh Atronach, but it's just not, I guess. So what's the big deal? Why bring all this up? Well, the big deal is that, at least according to the practitioners of flesh magic, flesh, and the idea of bone and meat and skin, is actually one of the base elements of the universe, along with fire, air, earth, and water. You know, the classics. All those, and like, you know, meat. Sure, all we have to go off of is some weird fleshomancer's words. But a general rule of thumb for this series is that you should just believe what NPCs tell you most of the time. And building a giant Frankenstein's monster isn't all there is to flesh magic. So there's also flesh sculpting, and there's just no way these two aren't connected. I mean, they both use our favorite element of the periodic table, meat. See, this one is simple enough, sort of. You can just sort of use magic to manipulate people's bodies, primarily usually their face, which weirdly enough still requires surgical tools, but this isn't just plastic surgery done with the aid of strong restoration magic. No, this is flesh magic, and yes, that lady in the Ratway was doing this to you. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you had Frankenstein magic used on your face. Now, moving on to this odd one, we have Thuma vocalism, This one seems to be less of its own type of magic and more of a way to cast magic. This series has always been a little weird about casting spells. For the most part, it's just from your hand. Like, you're throwing a fireball, that's normal. But instead of writing runes down on like the ground with, I don't know, chalk or something, you're slamming them down onto the ground with a wave from your hand. But at the same time, there are also staffs, or staves, whatever. But those usually seem to have their own magic that's sort of stored within them. They have their own properties, and you just sort of let them out. But then there's the odd mention of wands. But the mention of wands has been very few and far between, so it just sort of muddies the water of understanding how this is all supposed to really work. And then to just add on top of this mess, we have Thuma vocalism. And I promise you it has nothing to do with the Thum. Probably. But apparently some people in universe think it might have something to do with tonal architecture, which, I mean, I don't really see how other than sound is involved. Either way, it's simple. Thuma vocalism allows you to simply sing and then magic happens. How someone uses their singing voice to determine the spell they want to cast, I don't know. I can't sing. But apparently, this is actually a good way to cast spells if for some reason you're just built wrong and can't seem to muster a spell out of your hand. But let's be honest, this is just so you can have a D&D bard in the Elder Scrolls. Don't lie to me, ESO. This is exactly why it was implemented, whoever came up with this idea. I know what you did, and I know why you did it. Now, I have one more I want to talk about before we move on to the just plain weird stuff, as if flesh magic wasn't weird enough, and that's soul magic. So, soul magic, what the fuck is that about? So, soul magic is very vague, and is mostly there just to explain things in ESO's base plot. I mean, come on, its description has to do with souls and vestiges, seeing as this concretely appears only in ESO as its own, brand of magic. Seemingly, the only way for a mortal to get their hands on some advanced soul magic is to have their soul ripped out of their body and put back in, because the only way you unlock all of this tiny skill tree is by beating the main game. Now, a spell like Soul Trap is seemingly connected to soul magic, which makes sense on paper, but the only other ability granted to you in ESO with soul magic is shooting a goddamn key beam at your enemy till they are disintegrated with like soul fire or something. I'm just wondering what that's all about, ESO. That's like a secret technique, I guess. I mean, you sort of, come back to life with maybe soul magic when you die in-game, and that's canon. I don't know if that's still canon after you beat the main game, because you get your soul back in your body, so I don't know if the Vestige is still immortal after that, because the Vestige was immortal during the main campaign at the very least. And if the Vestige stays immortal even after getting their soul back, they're just like so unbelievably overpowered. But whatever, so I mean, that's probably technically soul magic too, and you can improve your coming back from the dead skill with the soul magic tree. So do with that what you will. Now moving on to the magic that's just weird shit. So, who here is a fan of mushroom? Any real shroom fans in the audience? Well, do I have a type of magic for you? Mitocurgy, the magic of manipulating mushrooms. Because if there's one thing this series loves more than carving out vast oceans of lore out of one line of dialogue from Arena, it's mushrooms. So yeah, this type of magic is 99.99% of the time only used by people in House Telvanni, so they can grow their giant mushroom towers, aka the single most inconsistent looking thing in the series, next to Volendrun. Not many people outside of House Telvanni would really need this, although that's not to say it was exclusively used by House Telvanni, just pretty much exclusively. And if it was just being able to grow giant complex mushroom towers that bleed for some reason, I wouldn't have even mentioned it here. But no, because you can use this power to create horrifying living mushroom animals. Yeah, this is a certified ESO moment if I've ever seen it, because ZeniMax Online went to the RGG Studio School of Game Design and just reused everything and anything they can with a different coat of paint. And you know what? That's great. Genuinely. But not in this case, because oh my god, I hate these things so much. Just look at this. Look at the horse. It's so bad. It's vile. vile. It's evil. Theoretically, you could eat that. I mean, you could eat a horse, but like, that's just like mushroom. You could just bite into this thing. I don't like it, all right? All right, moving on from terrifying mushroom animals and the people who love to make them, we have spiders. Yep, the school of magic of spider crafting. Yeah, do you remember when Bethesda added this entire weird subclass to Skyrim via the Dragonborn DLC, where you can just become a weird master spider golem maker, I guess? And what do you do with your magic spider golems? Well, you just sort of chuck them at people. I feel like not enough people talk about this, mostly because outside of challenges, who's really using these? I mean, the only way to make the spider golems is in a random cave on Solstein with the legendary spider imbuing machine. I mean, oh, that must be up there with the Atronach Forge in terms of arbanuic pressure. And admittedly, there just weren't that many spiders either. There were a few variations of shock fire and ice spiders, a spider that can carry stuff, an oil spider, and a mind control spider. Like, they created an entire type of magic and just sort of plopped it in a cave. I mean, how many of you can call yourself a true spider-mancer, huh? Oh yeah, it also like sort of appears in ESO, I mean, but unfortunately, you can't be the spider-mancer in that situation. I guess in a way it's related to enchanting, but what it definitely is related to is building magic constructs, like a golem or a gargoyle. Yes, that means the legendary oil spider is right up there with the metal golem from Arena. Next on our little list here is snake magic. Guess what that does? Yes, you can control big-ass snakes with it. Primarily, it's used by the Maumur because, you know, sailing in water is sort of their shtick. And now, they don't use their snake magic to control any old big-ass snake, but instead, massive sea serpents that they use to take down fleets of ships because they're basically at war with the rest of the world for some reason. I guess they were mad that they got stuck on an archipelago instead of the giant continent. Theoretically, you could use this power to control any big-ass snake, not just a sea serpent, and don't worry to all you aspiring snake-omancers, there's more than enough big-ass snakes to go around. And hey, you could probably use this to control just normal-sized snakes, if that's your thing, I guess. You could become one of the greatest pirates known to Nirn by controlling an army of sea serpents. Yeah, but no, go ahead and become a snake charmer, why not? You know, Strauss Mackay will love you. Now, the final and most important magics in the entire series, Cheesemancy and Ovamancy. Yeah, so your first one is just the standard Sheogorath shit. I'm not exactly sure what Cheesemancy has in store for us, what you can really do with cheese magic, but hey, I bet you could make some pretty good cheese with it. Or maybe not. Maybe you can only manipulate cheese while it's cheese and you hold no domain over the dairy and acid required to make the cheese. Ovamancy is the magic of eggs, and apparently primarily the ability to put smaller eggs inside of larger eggs. Yeah, this is so inconsequential that there is only one known user of egg magic, and the UESP wiki doesn't even have a link for him. Now, there's just one more thing before we go. Apparently, in some way, shape, or form, hoodoo exists in the Elder Scrolls. Yeah, what? Now let's play everyone's favorite game, Arena or ESO. Was Hoodoo randomly name-dropped in Arena back when it had no idea what they were doing in terms of lore? I mean, hell, they called the Dark Elves Dro, or however you say it, one time in that game? Or was it some weird item in ESO that's just saying shit for no reason, as ESO often does? Alright, cast your votes, and yep, this time it was ESO. What did you mean by this? Anyway, with that, this little video is over. Go follow my art social medias to see art made of art. Do it or I will cry. Alright, so I'm out of here. Bye. Now, usually, I don't make videos on such fresh topics, nor do I really make rant videos either. But I don't know, I just feel like I had to say something because, I mean, what the hell was that? So, yeah, the new Elder Scrolls Online expansion was weirdly disappointing, so let's just quickly get right into it. So, what happened here?
Do you long for having your heart rinsed,
riz.
So the last expansion for ESO was ESO Necrom, and was also part 1 to this 2-act story, which is fairly standard for ESO. Ever since Elsewhere, every new storyline comes in 2 parts. At the end, there's a third, smaller act where everyone comes together from each parts of the story to save the day once and for all. Well, ESO Necrom was the first part in the Shadow over Morrowind storyline, a story about you coming to the aid of Hermaeus Mora to not just save the realm of Apocrypha, but all of reality itself. And man, was it a banger! So admittedly, ESO Necrom was the first expansion I played as it came out, because I had to beat all the other ones well after they had already released, because I'm not a day one player. So I was pleasantly blown away when Necrom was straight up a thrill ride full of actual unseen twists and turns in a brand new setting with some of the best characters ESO had ever produced. I mean, sure, the game has tons of great characters, the whole series has tons of great characters, but something about the gang that we got to know here was just really good. I don't know. Notably, the star of the show, Lair Morrill, a mage who is just so good at what she does, even Hermaeus Mora sees her as a confidant. On top of that, there was Scroot, the little Daedra thingy, the best character ever, Meln the Mouthless, a Telvanni wizard ghost you keep in your pocket, and Gidane, this poor normal bastard who you roped into this whole mess. And he falls in love with Lair Morrill. These guys really are the heart of Necrom that make it such a good expansion. But wait, there's more. Not only did we get to see even more of Morrowind, we got to fully explore Apocrypha. Yeah, that's right, not only did we get a new landmass, we got a whole new dimension to explore. Apocrypha is bar none the most entertaining new dimension the game added since the Clockwork City. It's dripping with not only black sludge, but also atmosphere. Every inch of this place is just so interesting to look at. And it expanded Hermaeus Mora's realm from just an infinite library like we saw in Skyrim to something much more grander and still filled with books. All in all, Necrom was a great expansion, and I was so excited for the second half of this storyline. When Necrom ended on a cliffhanger that there was a forgotten, supremely powerful Daedric prince that we had never heard of before, one so powerful and threatening to reality that Hermaeus Mora teamed up with a few other Daedric princes to weaken her, imprison her, and then make everyone forget about her, which is about as close as killing a Daedric prince as possible. I mean, I was so hyped. You need to understand, this was unprecedented. Sure, Bethesda made Jiggalag happen years ago. Another lost prince, but this one was different. He was just a twist where Sheogorath was secretly Jiggalag the whole time, and Jiggalag was basically just jumped by all the other princes and turned insane, so he became Sheogorath. Also, on top of that, that was sort of the whole selling point of that DLC of the Shivering Isles. It was save this place from the long-lost prince Jiggalag. You know, it was well known when it was going on. This was nowhere in the marketing. This was just some big secret that isn't revealed until the end. Sure, Jiggalag was also described as super powerful, but the Daedra just jumped his ass because they were mad about how much of Oblivion he had controlled. These guys sealed away Prince Athelia because she was a threat to not only them and their realms, but also all of reality. These are much bigger stakes than anything involving Jiggalag ever was. And to top that off, the thing that made this extra unprecedented is that ZeniMax Online did. This was not Bethesda's doing. Now, ZeniMax Online expands lore all the time. They've done the Argonians and the Bretons a great service in expanding their lore, and especially the Bretons. But this was all new. Sure, before this, they invented a small realm in Oblivion that basically acts as an interdimensional Grand Central Station for Daedra, but there was always said to be countless realms aside from the major ones. So this is just brand new lore that they had made. When this all dropped, we had no idea where this plot was gonna go. How do we stop her? What's she all about? Can she really be that dangerous? I mean, it was a thrilling time for lore nerds like me. And I mean, look how overly dramatic I was in this video that came out around the same time. And they left us on a major cliffhanger, so there's not much to talk about it yet. But let's just say it was very unnerving to hear a character like Hermaeus Mora scared. But that was then, and this is now. So, what happened?
Teach you how to feel, Sigma to Sigma.
So a little bit ago, the disappointment started when we got to see the big bad Athelia, and she just looked like this, and it's just a tall woman with tattoos and crystal butterfly wings. Well, damn, that's not what I expected, but okay. The princes don't always look so grandiose. I mean, Sheogorath is just a dude, but, you know, he's not really supposed to be that scary. Azura appears just as a Dunmer woman in a dress sometimes. You know, I expected a little more. But it was just a trailer, so I thought, who knows, maybe there will be more. Spoilers, there isn't. There is no more. Some odd things to note about this DLC is that this expansion takes place in Cyrodiil, so not only in not a new place, but also not in Morrowind, when the story was called Shadow over Morrowind. But I mean, hey, I guess we all change our minds sometimes during the creative process. But yeah, it's just Cyrodiil, just a small part of Cyrodiil. Now, I love Cyrodiil, but it was pretty cool in the last one where we got to explore somewhere where we haven't seen, except, in the 2D games. I don't know, I guess I was just expecting something a little extra, and maybe we were supposed to get that with the new jungle in the area, but that was so underwhelming, I want to cry, and I'll get onto that later. So let me break down all my issues in a more concise manner here. Number 1, the characters. So, yeah, remember a few minutes ago when I said that the group of characters in Necrom were really the heart of that DLC? Well, it's definitely not the same in this DLC. In this, you team up with the single most generic elf and guard character ever. We have Baragon, a plucky, well-traveled adventurer who is about as deep as my description, and this Imperial Guard woman, who was even more generic, so much so that I don't even remember her name. See, her role, that she doesn't like that the Wood Elves are encroaching in the area, and also she's kind of stern. Blairmaril is here, but she might as well not be. She's so underused, it's crazy. 90% of the time, while we're running around with Baragon, she is stuck back in his giant-ass townhouse that is just sort of ponders most of the DLC and doesn't really do much. Sometimes she's out with you, but for the vast majority of the time, you're stuck with Baragon. Meanwhile, last time, she was with you all the time. Baragon and the Imperial Guard woman aren't terrible, they're just so boring, especially in comparison to the last group. They feel like characters you'd encounter in a long side quest, and that's it. It's just the 3 of them for the entire DLC, and for the vast majority of the time, it's just these 2, not even Leomaril. That leads me on to my next point, stories and missions. So ESO isn't the craziest when it comes to quests. You're always going to be going somewhere to fight someone to get something at some point. Usually, if it's that simple, it's somewhere cool and you find out something important, but in the Gold Road, it's just nothing. For the majority of the DLC, Baragon just says, you need to go check out these 3 different places, and he just keeps sending you to like 3 different locations. And then you go fight some people and you find out nothing. You learn nothing, man. It's like, whoa, dude, are you trying to tell me that Hermaeus Mora and Athelia argued multiple times before he locked her up? That's so crazy, dude. Next, you're gonna tell me she was resistant to the idea of being in prison forever. Whoa! To rub salt upon wounds here, the majority of the time you aren't even dealing with Athelia, except in one quest where you have to do a weird minigame where you make her a drink. But no, for the vast majority of the time, you're dealing with the implied politics of the Bosmer encroaching onto the Westweald in that mysterious forest. Like, sure, yeah, I get to burn down an entire tree fort. That was cool, I guess. But then it was just more like drama about the Bosmer encroaching in the weird forest. The forest that quickly became very, very super lame. And this is partly on me for having ideas in my head from before the expansion came out. But I mean, come on, I know I'm not the only person who had this idea. So one of the first things you'll probably learn about when you take a deep dive into the Elder Scrolls lore for the first time is that Tiber Septim, Talos, achieved Chim. And Chim is a whole rabbit hole on its own, and I'm not going to cover it here, but basically he used that power to remove all of the forests and jungles that covered Cyrodiil from ever existing. He just sort of snapped them out of ever happening, all because the Imperials were complaining they had a hard time hunting in them. And this is supposed to demonstrate just how powerful he is, because if the jungles were always there, then why would the Imperials, the native population, have a hard time hunting in their native land? But they would have never asked him to do something about it if they were never there, blah blah blah. Time loop doesn't matter, Talos power. But then the DLC comes out, and there's suddenly these foresty jungle areas mysteriously springing up overnight in Cyrodiil, and in an area where a Daedric prince who has the power to change fate and reality at whim is, sort of wandering around. So a bunch of people, me included, came to think that maybe this would be a cool reference to show just how unstable things had become, that, whoa, she's gonna be undoing things that hadn't even happened yet because Tiber Septim wouldn't be born for like another 200 years. But no, Athelia's minions gave a Bosmer cult some evil magic seeds to make this happen so they can take over Westweald. Just so boring. And that's the thing, she doesn't fucking do anything. The closest we got to seeing her crazy powers are when we get to speak to some alternate versions of her, which are nowhere near as cool as it sounds. They keep going on and on about how unstable reality is, but nothing happens besides some tiny tears in reality that don't do anything, and people just point at him and go, oh, isn't that crazy? Reality's about to fall apart. But this happens like twice. You see like these tears like 2 times before the DLC is over. And thirdly, everything is just so underwhelming. Like I said, nothing nothing ever happens in this DLC. Sure, we get to fight her and her minion, but she just surrenders, and then we banish her to a reality without magic, which was really weird, and let's never expand upon that, please. That opens up too many annoying conversations. And even when things are supposed to be exciting and crazy, they just aren't. They tried to have another moment like when you're storming the Crystal Lake Law in Somerset. You use a ballista to blow open a door or whatever. But instead of this exciting moment where you're all rushing to the top of the tower and you blow down a door and it's fun, you just sort of stand on top of this fort and fire it very slowly at waves of Daedra who stand there and do nothing until you kill them. Yeah, it's not really consequential at all. And I genuinely do not even remember why we are trying to save this fort. I don't think it ever comes back up. Just everything is a step back from Necrom. I mean, Meln doesn't even return except for a cameo at the end where he says one line at the dance party ending that happens at the end of every storyline. Like, there's been not as good follow-ups to first half of stories, and there's been stories that are just kind of lame entirely. Storylines like Greymoor. The Greymoor storyline is really underwhelming when compared to the other ones. Both sides are fairly consistent, and the characters and settings are both equally good. It's just not as good as the other ones. This was a follow-up to one of, if not the best expansions so far. I mean, the Legacy of the Breton storyline is 90% politics and is so much better than this thing. That's because High Isle and Firesong are actually just really fucking good. I thought they'd be really boring, but it's like my second favorite storyline. Either way, how does the Legacy of the Bretons, nobody's favorite race in this series, how is that storyline infinitely more thrilling and fun than a story about defeating a lost Daedric prince? How did you make it so boring? How did you do this? It's a feat, honestly. I guess if you combine them, overall, the story had an amazingly strong first half. So, sort of just equals out to the whole storyline being good, I guess. I'm sure the next one will be great. This isn't a whole doom and gloom, ESO has fallen, millions must play Final Fantasy XIV video. The story bits that are left up in the air that we can expand upon are still there. Namely, the story bit with Lyrinth. I mean, like, come on, we cannot just leave that ominous cliffhanger alone. We gotta expand upon that in a DLC at some point. I mean, come on, guys, I can't put her in my house till that's resolved now, can I? I was just hoping for a bit more from this DLC, you know, but at least they tied up Athelia's story very well. No real loose ends. She's never gonna come back. Nobody can ever get to her. She banished all her powers to the void, whatever that means. And hey, there was a neat thing. Her assistant got killed. Like, he's dead. The first ever, like, real death for a Daedra permanent we've ever seen. So, I mean, hey, Torvasard gets that, and Torvasard was probably the best character in this second half, even though he was in the first half, but, you know, he was still good in this second half, so he gets a good legacy. I don't think we're ever going to be destroying another Daedric prince like we did her, banishing her to another reality and all that. But maybe this is a new step with ZeniMax. Maybe we'll see more brand new big stuff like Athelia. I just hope they stick the landing next time. And with that, this weird, unplanned video is over. Go follow my Twitter and Newgrounds for art, especially the Twitter. I'm looking at you. Go follow it right now. Come on, you won't regret it, probably. Anyway, see you later. The world of the Elder Scrolls is a high fantasy setting. There's blissful afterlives you can look forward to after your death, and even beings considered dark, evil gods can be reasoned with. And on top of that, there's funny talking cat people who all started out as kittens, and that's funny because even the most deadly Khajiit warrior looked like this at one point. What I'm trying to illustrate here is that the world we're presented with in the Elder Scrolls is not a total grim, dark fairy tale. In fact, it's overall pretty positive. But don't let that fool you. This is no children's story. Now, while I said the princes, these dark gods, are capable of reason, they are still considered evil for a good reason, and still inhabit and rule over a dimension comprised of smaller dimensions that hang over an infinite void. Now, the series is pretty upfront with its depiction of its Daedra. The princes can be funny and charming or comically evil. The lesser Daedra are just the same, if not even more so. But that's what makes the moments when you're reminded of just what they are stick out even more. Let's look at Vermina, the Prince of Dreams, one of the lesser discussed princes by fans. She doesn't have the entertaining dialogue of Sheogorath or the grand moments of Mehrunes Dagon, but she's extremely powerful in ways you might not even realize. In truth, she's more similar to Hermaeus Mora than any other prince. As I said, she lords over dreams and nightmares. Yes, while outside of exceptional events like the Oblivion Crisis or cultists directly messing with people, most mortals of Mundus are directly out of the grasp of Daedric forces. This is except for Vermina, because she owns your dreams. She makes your nightmares, and everyone who sleeps is vulnerable to her. Besides, dreams hold a special place in the Elder Scrolls, as I've explained before in videos. From small-scale things like Daggerfall's dreamers to large, complex ideas like all of reality being the dream of a greater being, a godhead. The power of dreams are prominent in the series, and thanks to Oblivion, we can see firsthand the power of Vermina. In Vermina's Oblivion quest, the hero of Kavachi is tasked with getting an artifact that was stolen from her by a mage named Arkved, the Orb of Dreams. But by the time you arrive at his tower, it's already been turned into this non-Euclidean hellscape. You haven't entered Oblivion, no. This is still very much Mundus. This is the power of dreams. From a lore perspective, this is pretty spooky. But even more so from a game perspective, this mission genuinely creeped me out. For one, it's just well made. But this is Oblivion we're talking about. It's bright, it's colorful, it's very, very, very often goofy. And then suddenly, it's halted when you're met with this. After you stumble through the waking dream of his tower, you'll find Arkved sleeping soundly in his room. His dreams were empowered by the orb, allowing him to warp reality to the extent that you just saw. He won't wake up even if you attack him. He just lays there dreaming the very room around you. He's likely been able to see us or sense us the entire time. So kill him or leave him, because either way you won't get any more information out of him. But speaking of princes who can warp reality, I briefly mentioned Hermaeus Mora. His horror is a lot more outward in appearance, taking obvious notes from H.P. Lovecraft's work. But that isn't to say the rest of the series isn't influenced by H.P. Lovecraft, just more so, Hermaeus Mora is the culmination of that. His realm is the bottom of an empty ocean, the seafloor of a body of water that may have never existed, yet it's surrounded by oceans of black sludge. The wreckage of boats and ships can be found dotting the landscape, making you really wonder if this place was at one time covered by water. But when was that, and who sailed these waters of Oblivion? On the other half of his realm, far from the green, wispy air, is a more colorful region, the Chroma Incognito, a place filled with galaxy-like clusters of stars. These colors out of space seem to flow like water, yet just hang in the sky. All across this realm, though, can be found endless libraries of forbidden knowledge, secrets that could easily destroy a person's mind, and those who succumb to this fate are likely to end up as one of the hushed, mindless monsters whose pursuit of knowledge left them as they are now. But out of all of Mora's big boy libraries, the biggest boy of them all is the Infinite Panopticon. Few beings have ever stepped foot in this place, and even fewer mortals. This is basically the heart of the realm. Now journey far enough past the hushed, past a lot of fish, and past the seekers, you'll start to notice these dotting the walls. Now, when I was first playing through ESO Necrom, this stood out to me. A lot of things in ESO do, for better or for worse. Maybe I'm just a little baby, but there was something really off-putting about these when I saw them. You're deep in the heart of the realm, you're going through layers of memories of an abstract god, and suddenly you're met with these abnormally large, but certainly humanoid, shriveled, petrified bodies emerging from these coral-like structures with faces of terror. It's not exactly their appearance that freaked me out. If that was the case, I would never even be able to play Fallout. No, it was their placement. What were they doing here, and who were they? We're deep in the bowels of Apocrypha. I would expect more abstract ideas, concepts, things that don't make any sense, but I'm met with just petrified people. Are these the bodies of people who journeyed through the Infinite Panopticon before? But they're too large. They're not the size of a person in the Elder Scrolls. They're certainly not giants either. And if they were to fall to the forces of the Infinite Panopticon, would they not just become the Hushed or something else? Or just die? Why are they blooming out of coral? Why do some of them have blindfolds on? Why are they screaming in terror? Now, I could move on to a very related topic from ESO Necrom, but that would be a very large spoiler. And they left us on a major cliffhanger, so there's not much to talk about it yet. But let's just say it was very unnerving to hear a character like Hermaeus Mora scared. But speaking of abnormally large bodies, let's take a step back into Fargrave and look at a similar case of unknown remains. The Gargantuans of Fargrave. These massive skeletons can be seen all around this small realm. The Gargantuans are, well, gargantuan. They could swallow a giant from Skyrim with ease. So what's so spooky scary about these skeletons? Well, it's because of a few things. Nobody really knows anything about these beings. None of the mortal or Daedric inhabitants know what they were or why they're here. All they have is a few legends, and another reason is These are not Daedra, and they are not mortal. They're obviously not Daedra because they're dead. The Dremora, the Daedra, they don't die, they reform when they're killed. Sometimes it takes a while, depending on how hard you beat them, but they'll always come back. And they're obviously not mortal because I shouldn't even have to explain why they're clearly not from Mundus. So what are these things? Well, the only beings who fit this description are, well, the Aedra. Non-mortal beings who can die. It kind of fits the bill, but at the same time, one of the few things people can say about these monolithic bodies is it's believed at some point they used to carry Fargrave on their shoulders. They'd walk through Oblivion and the Void carrying this realm, moving it from place to place, which certainly doesn't fit the activities of an Aedra. So what are these things, and how can you walk through the Void? Now, moving on from Oblivion into Mundus, we have some horrors beyond your comprehension to look at. The many races of Tamriel hold many abilities, some of which I am still not sure if I'm meant to take literally or not. I can understand Adrenaline Rush, but can every Imperial actually just make things calm down? Or is that just meant to show how diplomacy is considered a virtue in Imperial society, so most Imperials are just good at that? I don't know. Anyway, there's an important ability possessed by all Bosmer that you don't hear about much. This ability is called the Wild Hunt. The Wild Hunt is something Bosmer tend not to tell people outside of Valenwood. It's considered a sin and therefore is only used in times of extreme desperation or in times of extreme revenge. While many people in lore and also in the community have a faint idea that the Bosmer have some sort of shape-shifting abilities, the Wild Hunt is far more and far worse than simply turning into animals. When the Wild Hunt begins, a horde of Bosmer change into these monsters, forming into a wave of unstoppable carnage. They become mindless killing machines and leave nothing left in their wake, and when they run out of things to destroy, they will turn on each other till there's nothing left, and the few that might remain scatter to the forests. To fully illustrate the horror on display here, I will have my friend read a chunk of the UESP entry verbatim.
These shapeshifters are stripped of their flesh from their bone instantaneously, and turn into creatures that defy all attempts to identify them. Some may not even turn into creatures at all, and instead turn into great writhing tongues, unfettered by lips or teeth, and can take on a gaseous form which makes them impossible to contain without the aid of magic. There's even some suggestion that they can take on the form of water or waves of blood. The forms they take are not static, however, as they appear like a serpent one moment and shift into another creature the next moment. When Bosmer invoke the Wild Hunt, it causes a change in wild animals as well. Beasts typically transform into beings that are part plant and part animal.
Yes, that's right. Every single Bosmer from Faendel to Fargoth has these powers just beneath the surface of their skin. Imagine what an army would look like. An ocean of blood with the sole goal to end anything it can. And in a second, the ocean could just as easily turn into a horde of indescribable horrors akin to the inhabitants of the Nameless City from H.P. Lovecraft. See, I told you it wasn't just Hermaeus Mora. But not only are the Bosmer turned, but like what was said, so are the animals nearby, though it seems their transformations are a bit more predictable. But like I said earlier, only most of these abominations are destroyed by each other. Some do escape and are said to live for a very, very long time. And the transformation is irreversible. These Bosmer are forever stuck like this. Meaning, even though there hasn't been a Wild Hunt since before the events of Daggerfall, monsters created by the Wild Hunt are still out there, with nothing to do but roam. And who knows how far they could have traveled in all this time. These monsters very well could be stalking the forests of all of Tamriel by now. There's a million more scary things in the Elder Scrolls I could talk about, and there's a good chance I will in a future video, but I'd like to talk about one more in this video at least. See, there's always been talk about the dimension of the Void throughout the series. Sithis this and Sithis that. But the Markarth DLC of the Dark Heart of Skyrim storyline in ESO actually made the Void really spooky. Not to go over the entire plot, but the story involves a lot of experimenting with the Void. Things happen in this DLC that there's not a lot of lore explanation for because it's never happened before, you know? Plot-wise, this was all untreaded ground, but during these experiments with the Void, shades were created. These are or were people corrupted to the core by the Void. You actually speak with someone who was turned and it's not pleasant. They're in pain. They talk about darkness within them, and once you get the information you need, all they'll say is, I'm fading away. Maybe I'm being a little too melodramatic, but these things are freaky. There's the obvious horror on display, they look spooky enough, but I think it's the idea that these are not naturally occurring beings like Daedra, or even just a ghost. But these are not monsters summoned from the void either. These are just experiments gone wrong. These were people, but now they're beings without a precedent. They have no home realm like other supernatural beings, but Mundus. But they very clearly aren't fit to exist in the mortal world anymore. And with that, the video is over. You should go sub to my friend's channel here if you like spooky things, and follow my social media where I post my arts, because I post a lot of them. Stuff that you do not see on YouTube, even, with the YouTube shorts. And hey, if there's something else that's pretty spooky in the Elder Scrolls that you think I should go ahead and talk about, go ahead and tell me then. And maybe I'll shout you out in a future video, or maybe I'll never make a part 2 to this ever. Who knows? I'm sure a lot of people are aware that The Elder Scrolls isn't your typical fantasy series. There's a few obvious things to note, like the cat people and the lizard people. Even though a few series out there do that sort of thing, The Elder Scrolls really put their stamp on the idea in the minds of most people. There's stuff like the dwarven machinery, but there's tons of fantasy with some race with technology ahead of the rest of the world. So I could just jump into the deep end with the cosmic stuff like Chim or the Towers or whatever, or arbitrary stuff like the night sky not being real or something like that. And then every normal person would click off the video. So instead I'm going to cover the things in the series that are present in almost every generic fantasy and tell you how the Elder Scrolls puts their own special little twist on it. Dwarves. Now, I've mentioned before how the advanced technology isn't that crazy and stand out, but there's more to it than that. Now, I'm sure you've probably rolled your eyes and thought, "Oi, this guy's gonna mention how the dwarves in the Elder Scrolls aren't actually short, or about how they're elves, too." Everyone knows that. And yeah, I should mention that, but, there's more to it. See, the orcs in the Elder Scrolls are definitely elves in the series, but they still look the part of orcs, and at first glance, they play the part of orcs, but we'll get to that later. But the dwarves in the Elder Scrolls are such a far cry from this that even at a first glance, they just don't resemble them at all. See, unlike in other fantasy series, the Elder Scrolls dwarves are actually elves and, well, weren't actually short. But also, these dwarves aren't based on any Norse mythology or culture. No, these aren't tiny Vikings. No, these guys were like fucking Mesopotamians with magic steampunk robots, but without any of that nasty Victorian England part to it. I think the visuals they use are honestly the most unique thing about them. So when it comes to fantasy, the Elder Scrolls series never really stays in that Northwest European setting where most fantasies start. Nope, the dwarves are from Iraq and we love them for it. Hell, the only reason they're canonically called dwarves is because there was giants nearby who thought that they were a bunch of little cute baby people. Also, these dwarves don't act like your typical fantasy dwarves. They definitely aren't nice, friendly people who come and help you out on an adventure, or let you stay in their cabin to hide from an evil witch, or whatever it is that Varric does. No, these guys were cold, unfeeling, magic scientists who totally risk their own life and end yours if it meant attempting to prove their own coolness to one another. I mean, these guys were building a giant god robot because they could. Also, I mean, unlike, most fantasy dwarves, the Dwemer are gone. Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but in most fantasy movies and games and books, the fantasy aspects are actually present. The dwarves ain't coming back. You only get to talk to the Dementia one and a ghost every now and then. Hey, remember when I said we'd get to orcs later? Yeah, well, that's right now. So orcs, or Orsimer in this case, like I said, at first glance, seem like the same old orcs from every other fantasy. Evil, dumb, green monster people who kill everything for some reason in particular. But the neat thing is, in the Elder Scrolls, that's what people think orcs are, because of, reasons. But the Orsimer are actually so much more than that. For a notable visual difference from most other fantasy orcs, or orcs, is that the Orsimer are Mongolian. Like I said, Bethesda does not stick to the Northwest European setting. Not only do the orcs stand out by being inspired by Mongolian culture and iconography instead of being cultureless monster men or British, they also stand out by just being people. Yeah, they're a race with a very warrior's honor base to it, but besides all that, they're just dudes. These are normal-ass people with normal-ass jobs, like being the most famous chef in the Empire, or running a library at the College of Winterhold, or just being a bard. These are very much not typical fantasy orc things to do, if you haven't noticed. Even orc warlords like Gortwog, at first glance, yeah, they do seem like big-ass scary warlords who are causing trouble for the surrounding kingdoms and wearing a loincloth. But really, he's a highly intelligent strategist who is mostly attempting to regain land that by the time Daggerfall, the game he's in, takes place, is definitely historically orc territory, and he's doing all this just so he can surrender that territory to the Empire, and in doing so, they'd have to acknowledge his kingdom's legitimacy and the orcs as people's legitimacy. Overall, elves in the series stand out a lot because they're just people. Yeah, most of them live longer than humans, but they aren't, close to immortal, and most of them are just like farmers or run stores. Dragons. So dragons in the Elder Scrolls are something special. Now, dragons being sentient, talking beings isn't anything new by any means. Although I feel like it wasn't exactly super common before, even though it appeared in, a few very notable works. But now I feel it's sort of come back as almost the standard in recent years. Like, if you got a dragon, it talks, it's basically a giant person. The Elder Scrolls really loves that aspect of the series. Like, they could practically be considered just another race on Tamriel. I mean, if a dragon can hold down a job as a soldier of Tiber Septim, then who's to say a dragon can't run a bar? But also, dragons in the Elder Scrolls are a little bit more than just talking flying lizard people. They're gods. Well, not exactly, but not exactly not, if you catch my drift. The dragons in the Elder Scrolls are a direct creation of Akatosh, the dragon god of time. They're little shreds of the god turned into separate but connected beings. They're extremely immortal, with just a sort of innate connection to their bodies that allow them to come back to life much easier than any other being in the Elder Scrolls. They're also, assumedly, sexless beings who are all men, so yeah, no baby dragons and dragon eggs, none of that. Honestly, with how reclusive dragons became and how inherently magical they are, it makes me wonder if they even need to eat food. And there's also the other thing everyone who's ever played Skyrim has heard at some point. Yes, the dragons are not typical fantasy dragons by typical fantasy terms. Instead, technically, they are considered a similar, often related creature called wyverns, because dragons are supposed to have 4 legs, and in the Elder Scrolls, the dragons only have 2. But that's just another twist, right? I mean, hey, it's different. Also, probably because they already showed off a dragon in Redguard by the time Skyrim came out. Oh, also, the dragons can do a lot more than just breathe fire. They can, rip open portals in reality, summon the undead, make it rain meteors, shove stuff really hard. Oh yeah, and they can also violently rip your soul out of your body. Yeah, I don't remember Smaug doing that one. We also have lycanthropy to talk about, werewolves, people turning into big-ass wolfmen, or in much lamer instances, people just turning into wolves. It's actually fairly normal in comparison to everything we talked about for the Elder Scrolls, except for the part where it's directly tied into Haircene, the Daedric god of the hunt. But besides that, it's just turning into big-ass wolfmen with a few variations, so I probably wouldn't mention that if that's where it ended. No, werewolves are just the beginning. We've got plenty more where that came from. Most probably noticed the werebears on Solstein while playing Skyrim. And very cool people will know that you can just straight up be a wereboar in Daggerfall, but there's even more we have. There's the amazing werebats of Valenwood, which definitely are the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Also in Valenwood, there's the werevultures, which just sounds so lame that I already hate it. On the much cooler side, there's the were-lion that can be found in a few places, and there's the were-crocodile. And best of all, there's the were-shark that ESO keeps mentioning, but refuse to show because they're cowards. And on top of all of these goofy-ass forms and cool ideas, there's a few weird variations like Werewolf Lord, who are just really special people to Haircene, so they get to be this sort of weird wolf person that mixes with your real race. So you can be a weird wolf lizard. And then there are just the Beastmen, which I didn't even know about till researching this, who are basically just like rabid monster people who are kind of like the Wolfman. I really like that one, actually. And to cap off this simple video, I'd like to talk about the thing that I don't think enough people give the Elder Scrolls credit on. I've already mentioned before, but it's the fact that it doesn't remain within the standard Northwest European setting. In fact, the only places that are totally applicable to that is like Skyrim, and that's like really north on that Northwest scale, and High Rock, which is where it's definitely most applicable. There's tons of fantasy series out there that have these other places that, aren't the typical Northwest culture, but I find that most of them still end up being 100% focused on this Northwest European setting. Sure, these other cultures will exist, but they'll be far off and you won't actually learn that much about them. You only talk about them when some exotic character shows up, but not in the Elder Scrolls. No, High Rock is the place where it's most applicable and also is like the most underdeveloped and boring part of the series. Hell, the most dominating culture in the series, the biggest province in the series, is the Imperial culture, is Cyrodiil. And while, yeah, that's a European setting, it's not Northwest European. No. The Imperials are Italian. Well, Roman. And while Oblivion didn't do as good of a job as it should have representing that Roman culture, ESO definitely has. Like, dear lord, some of the outfits they have on the Imperials are just asking to have them assassinated by the Senate. I just think it's a complaint that I hear often about the general landscape of fantasy. And then people will come around and they'll pull these obscure series from 1962 out, which is all fine and dandy, shine light on your favorite series. But, like, you could just show them a copy of Morrowind and it'll change their life. And with that, this video is over. You should look at my social medias. I make art, a lot of it. Yeah, I don't care. Subscribe if you want. I don't care about that part. So, like many fans of the Elder Scrolls, you likely didn't start with the first 2 games. Now, don't feel bad about it. They were PC only and came out so long ago they had floppy disk versions. Hell, Arena was already 8 years old by the time I was born. So, I certainly didn't start with them either. So, a lot of fans, after at least playing through Skyrim, will turn their attention to the rest of the series, and notably, the villains of the series. You'll see and learn about Mankar Cameron, Dagothur, and Yegarthar. Maybe you'll take a sidestep into the wild side and look at a spin-off for villains like Admiral Richton and that time Mehrunes Dagon looked like a super mutant. But after a bit, you'll ask, hey, what about Daggerfall? And then the main first answer you'll get is this guy, a noble, a knight, Lord Woodbourne. And you'll go, huh? This guy? Really? I mean, he's just like a dude, what? Well, luckily for you, the answer is not so clear-cut, so let me illuminate that for you. So, the plot of Daggerfall sets off with the Emperor asking you, a member of the Blades, to travel to Iliac Bay to find out why the recently dead king of the Kingdom of Daggerfall is haunting his capital. Oh, and to retrieve the letters of a personal nature to the Queen. I mean, what do you want? Infidelity runs in the family here. Although I've made this joke a few times too many, and it's not exactly true, but let's be real here, it's sort of true if you know what I mean. So, that's simple. Well, no, not really. Spoilers for a 27-year-old game, but this plot somehow ends up with you traveling to the realm of the gods, and the plot is about who can control a giant god robot that all culminates in time being broken, resulting in every ending of the game being canon at once. That, though, is neither here nor there right now, because let's look at Lord Woodbourne, who just so happens to be the guy who killed King Lysandus, the king of Daggerfall. So, of course, he should be the main villain, and sure, maybe, but the issue is, we don't know anything about this guy, literally next to nothing. Every other villain has a bunch of lore, or at least a strong presence, at the very least. Lord Woodbourne has neither of those, and he doesn't even get his own in-game sprite. I mean, hey, at least he has his own portrait, but you know who had their own in-game sprite? The villain of the previous game. Okay, but let's look at what we do know about this guy. He's a minor noble, he's really not of much renown, he's a member of the Knights of the Rose, not to be confused with the Knights of the Thorn, he's married to the Princess of Wayrest, he killed King Lysandus, he wanted to use the Totem of Tiber Septim to get the Numidium, he's generally an unpleasant person, and his name is Woodbourne, and yeah, that's about it. That's all we have, really. Kinda shocking that the person with so little information is meant to be the big bad guy of the game. I mean, really, your confrontation is like the halfway point. Through your investigations, you find out that it all goes back to him, and then you go to his house and you kill him in a very anticlimactic fight, so pretty standard Elder Scrolls affair there. After that, the later section of the story involves a bunch of politicians and cult leaders demanding that you give them the Totem of Tiber Septim. So let's take a look at these goons and see if we can suss out a villain from them. Let's start out with a name that may be familiar to some of you, Mannimarco, the King of Worms. Yep, he made his debut in Daggerfall as one of the major players leading his necromancy cult. He, like many other leaders, is interested in the Totem of Tiber Septim, but instead of using it to wield the power of a big-ass giant god robot, instead, he wants to use it to turn himself into a god. I suppose to fulfill the wish he never got all those years ago. But no, even though he's mysterious and spooky, and also wants the power at play here, Mannimarco is just finally decided to be chill as hell after failing to eat Molag Bal, I guess. Yeah, he's kind of just detached from this whole thing. World domination isn't on his list of things to do anymore. He's actually kind of nice now. He's pretty pleasant to you when you show up in his hole. Hell, he even arranges a wedding in the game. So he just wants to become a god and leave Mundus behind, only popping in to amplify the mortals' necromantic powers. On occasion, because, you know, they worship him. And until that, he's just content with hanging out with his followers and half-naked dancers. Yeah, I guess he just sort of mellowed out with age, huh? So, Mannimarco isn't the villain, though he is spooky. Okay, so if it's not the scary necromancer, what about this guy, huh? He's the Underking. He's pretty whack and spooky. I mean, he could be the villain. He's on the box art. That means he must be the villain, right? Well, the Underking is a lot of things that involve some deep, deep lore shenanigans, but let's ignore those for right now and just say that the Underking was once a close ally of Tiber Septim. And it was actually the Underking's own soul that was used to create the Mantella, which was the new source of power for the Numidium after the Heart of Lorkhan was removed. The initial idea was that Tiber Septim and his main crew would use the Numidium to crush the Somerset Isles and bring it under the control of the Empire. And they did do that, but it wasn't the end. No, Tiber Septim kept using his big-ass robot to crush any resistance to his new empire, and to menace any minor royalty who just didn't like him. This, of course, made the Underking very, very mad, because, I mean, it's like if you lent your friend your car for the weekend and they just sort of stole it. I mean, the dude just wanted his soul back, and his close confidant, Tiber Septim, was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. So he fought to try to get it back, and it backfired on him. While Tiber Septim did lose the Numidium in the fight, the Mantella was rocketed into Aetherius where nobody till Daggerfall was gonna get at it. So this made the Underking into what he was, a super powerful but undying mage. Not immortal, just undying. He's rotted, he's decayed, but he still lived. After all that, he just became some sort of magic boogeyman that there's a lot of lore around, so I mean, look into it, it's pretty interesting. But come the time of Daggerfall, and he just wants to die. No world domination, no becoming a god like Mannimarco, no. He just wants to be released from his living hell. His argument is pretty solid. He doesn't want to use the Numidium, he just wants the Mantella, and it's his soul, so he's kind of the rightful owner anyways. Yeah, and that's what happens in his ending. He rejoins with the Mantella, and the Numidium just sort of explodes into a straight up mushroom cloud, and then he dies. And it also made this weird anti-magic zone, but that doesn't matter. Okay, so if false advertising Skeleton Man isn't the villain, then who is? Well, it's not Gortwog. No way, I've talked about Gortwog before a few times because he's just a legend, an overall great guy. He's the leader of Orsinium, he's a tactical genius, and he's just fighting for the rights of his fellow orcs. In his ending, he just used the Numidium to defend Orsinium and retake land that was historically owned by orcs anyway. He's doing all this so the Empire will just see the orcs as people. And here's what he has to say on why you should choose him. He sends a letter that says, "You are not orcish. How could you possibly understand what it is like? My people are treated like barbarians, slaughtered upon sight. Is it so unusual that we respond in kind? Violence begets violence. I aspire to raise my race from the mire. I will bring them to equal standing with the other races of Tamriel. To do this, I must have the Totem of Tiber Septim. I will not insult you by promises that there will be no blood shed, but I do swear by my crown and by my heirs, I shall not attempt to hold sway beyond the borders of Orsinium. My goal is to not conquer Tamriel, but to create an orcish homeland." I'm sorry, he's just the coolest, because he's like this big fake-out threat. You hear about him, he's the leader of the orcs, and it turns out that he's just a completely reasonable, very smart leader who just wants a place for his people. But now we're on to something very important to what I'm talking about here. See, there are 3 endings that are practically the same because they're all just giving the kings or queens of a certain major kingdom the totem of Tiber Septim, and then they use the Numidium to conquer the surrounding kingdoms. But one of them is explicitly important here because it's the ending of the man who actually kind of is a contender for villain with Woodbourne. The man being King Godhood, the new king of Daggerfall. This douche became king of Daggerfall after his father died, who you may remember from earlier, King Lysandus. Yep, it all comes full circle here. See, Godhood actually had a part to play in that. When you defeat Woodbourne, he claims that Godhood was in on the assassination plot the whole time. See, Lysandus was cheating on his wife with a woman named Medora Doreni, also known as the Witch of Daggerfall or the Queen of Oblivion. See, the Queen of Daggerfall would eventually find out and banish Medora from her court, which is reasonable, but what is less reasonable is that when Medora went back to her estate tower, the Queen cursed it so that Medora could never ever leave. Now, normally, I don't like to interject in the middle of my videos. I'd rather use text most of the time. But this is kind of a little important, so I somehow missed this. Well, I know how I missed this because it just sort of is weirdly important, but not, very well discussed. So, yeah, I just said that she goes back to her tower, her home, the Doreni Tower, right? Yeah. Well, it turns out that the Doreni Tower is also the Adamantine Tower, the first tower that holds up reality, that all other towers were loosely based on, at least. The one that the White Gold Tower was directly based on. This place was apparently constructed in the Merithic era by the Aedra to hold meetings, and she just lives there. This C-tier witch, along with the rest of her family, just get to live in this place. This is kind of weird, and also your character just takes a stroll right through there. I mean, you can see it in ESO, but your character in Daggerfall, the hero of Daggerfall, the agent of Daggerfall, they just stroll right through there, Sure. Yeah, why not? This, of course, upset Lysandus, so in an act that showed that he really actually cared for Medora, he asked his son and Lord Woodbourne to help him fake his own death, so that he can go and live for the rest of his life with Medora in her tower. So they had someone dressed like Lysandus and go into a battle with Godhood. Then, in the middle of the chaos, Godhood would kill the body double and then say that Lysandus was taken down by a stray arrow or something. But while that happened, during the fake-out death, Woodbourne was supposed to help Lysandus sneak away, but instead, he killed him. Even if Godhood didn't plan on the betrayal, he certainly didn't mind it. When his dad's ghost showed up, he should have known that he was really dead, and that the only person who could have done it was Woodbourne. But he didn't do anything, and he stuck with the public story. I mean, it sure would have been a bit of an issue for him if, I don't know, through poor leadership or just being generally disliked, his dad came out of hiding and turned out to be not dead, and then dethroned him. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have liked that, now would he? So after all of that, after his accomplice Woodbourne is killed, he's still trying to get his hands on the Numidium so he can take over Iliac Bay. And he's not nice about it either. Everyone else sends you letters asking for you to give them the totem, and why you should. Not him, though. He sends guards to threaten to kill you for it, and if you hand it over to them, these dudes call you a coward. That's not to say everyone has good reasons. Some of them try to kill you after you hand it over, but he certainly doesn't have a very good reason either. And on top of that, he doesn't even try to convince you. Like I said, he literally just tries to kill you for it if you don't just hand it over. Because if you don't hand it over, the guards will attempt to murder you and take it. So yeah, if he gets the Numidium, he just kills who knows how many people just to expand his already dominant kingdom. I mean, there's so many other people at play here. You can make an argument that his mom is actually secretly the villain. Maybe she orchestrated the plot to kill Lysandus. I mean, he cheated on her, and before that, she was cheating on him, so she didn't even have a good reason to, lock that woman in a tower forever magically. So, who is the villain here? Well, it's mostly kind of Woodbourne, but it seems to me, at least, that it's just a little bit of Godhood, if not a lot of bit of Godhood, depending on how you see this. The man is just extremely unpleasant, extremely hostile, and extremely suspicious. And on top of that, as silly as it may sound, he is the king of the namesake of the game, so that's something to add a little more credence to his importance now, isn't it? Though, after all I've said about these politicians and cult leaders who are so desperate for power that their feuding literally breaks time, I think the annoyingly true answer is that the villain of Daggerfall is more so everyone. Even the nicer people like the Empire or Gortwog. That the villain of this game is the political system and petty feuds and cloak and dagger of it all. That the many casualties that happened during the breaking of time called the Warp in the West were just like the victims of Yeagar Tharn and Molag Bal or Alduin or any of them. That even though you're the hero, you still give in to a lot of the demands of these people. You still work with them. And on top of that, you work for them. You are a personal agent of the Emperor. You work for the Empire, one of these feuding factions in Iliac Bay. Some real Metal Gear shit. But I'm still gonna say that the villain is Woodbourne because Bethesda should expand on his character. I don't want complexity, goddammit. I want a cool main villain, and I am willing to accept supplemental material made years later that will make Woodbourne cool. Come on, Bethesda, get on it. And with that, the video is over. Man, I had an entire Fallout video that I recorded, and I just scrapped it, and frankly, I am much happier with this. You should follow my social medias where I post my art. Yeah, and that's it. Alright, video's over. So we're back talking about the Elder Scrolls, because I like to. And we're here to discuss the first villain in the series, Jaegar Tharn. Not Jagar Tharn. Use your noodle, it's not Jaggermeister. I mean, you got Jarl right, so like, come on, get with it. So, Jaegar Tharn was an imperial advisor to Uriel Septim VII and a member of the insanely important Tharn family who've just been messing shit up since the dawn of time, I guess. Jaegar would be a close counselor to Uriel during his big imperialism adventures, and I guess Uriel just couldn't see that Jaegar was very clearly a cartoon villain the entire time. Unfortunately for the Emperor, probably during his daily cheat on my wife session, Jaegar took a slip out to Morrowind where apparently, disguised as a bard named Nightingale, or maybe it was a member of the Nightingales, but that's lamer, so let's go with Bard Jaegar. He just sort of stole a super weapon that's under Mournhold, the Staff of Chaos. See, so now armed with the Staff of Chaos, Jaegar would send the Emperor to a prison in Oblivion where time just moved super slowly compared to the mortal world, so he would be stuck there for hundreds of years being mentally tortured by magic nightmares and shit. Because fuck him in particular, I guess. Assumedly, this was to keep the dragon fires from going out because right after Jaegar threw Uriel into hell, he would use some sort of illusion magic to make himself look like Uriel, and then he'd run the Empire in his place. So it'd be a little suspect if the dragon fires went out while Uriel was seemingly just fine. Now, I could delve into the rest of the plot of Arena, but instead I'm just going to get into what we're doing here with this video. What was Jaegar planning to do? So if you don't know the plot of the rest of Arena, Jaegar doesn't just keep the Staff of Chaos around for very long. He drains his power into a magic rock, and then he splits the staff up into chunks and throws them into some dangerous places around Tamriel. Because if he just tried to destroy the staff, well, you know, he'd like tear the world apart or something. This means he's probably not just some power-hungry idiot. See, most people after secretly deposing of an emperor with a super weapon would probably want to keep the super weapon by their side. Yeah, it risks some Joe Schmo picking it up and letting the emperor out of his prison if he knew how to use it. But like, at the same time, it's gotta be pretty comforting that you can use this staff to just watchman people out of existence. But at the same time, I guess he doesn't want somebody picking up the staff and, you know, watchmaning him out of existence as well. So magic power, he's got enough of it. Plenty enough to hijack visions from your ghost companion, just so he can threaten you and geolocate your ass so he can shoot his Daedra minions at you to your exact location. So he doesn't care about the power of the staff, other than its one-time use to him. So maybe he just wants to be emperor. I mean, what's not to like about total power of an entire continent? Wielding the might of a strong empire sounds like a nice feeling, if you're into that sort of thing. But wait, what's that? Oh right, Jaegar let the Empire go to complete shit. So I'm not sure about wanting the power of the Ruby Throne, at least not in the same way it is now. Now maybe we can chalk all this up to him just being kind of dumb, and thinking that he could run an empire when he can't. But I mean, he was able to trick Uriel Septim Mr. My Dreams Tell Me shit for years without anyone catching on to his plans. So I don't think he's just a dumbass who thought wrong about his abilities to run a government. I mean, what good is an empire if nobody listens to you and everyone is trying to take land away from each other for one reason or another? I mean, what if Akavir invaded again? Anyway, he did a lot more to further his mysterious goals than just dox the Eternal Champion. So, let's say hypothetically, you're a battle mage who's taken over, I don't know, an entire empire. What do you do when you remember that there's an academy for battle mages in that empire that's located between dimensions and houses some of the strongest battle mages in the world? Well, I don't know about you, but I'm selling those guys out to a Daedric prince to get them killed ASAP. And yeah, that's what Jaegar did. After making a deal with Mehrunes Dagon, again, after he already did that to send the Emperor to Oblivion, he made another deal. Now, funnily enough, Mehrunes Dagon was defeated and all of his plans were ruined by the Apprentice of the Battlespire. You know, the standard video game plot. Yeagar, on the other hand, got what he wanted out of this. He got away scot-free for the most part. Basically, everyone on the Battlespire died, including an entire dragon, and the Battlespire was destroyed beyond repair. But 1 year-ish before the events of Battlespire took place, another event was taking place in between Skyrim, Hammerfell, and High Rock, the War of Bend-Mahak. During this war, a being was created, a being made of death and conflict and shadow magic. Umbraketh. This creepy sentient monster was something Yeagar and another powerful mage wanted to control. Yeagar, of course, wanted to control this monster to use as a weapon. We really don't have that great of a scope about how strong Umbraketh is, really, but the plot involved shadow magic, and Umbraketh is like made of shadow magic, so Umbraketh at full power has got to be somewhat devastating to turn loose on people. Though I'm not sure how well or how at all you'd control Umbraketh. It's very clearly a thinking being. I mean, not only can it speak, it apparently laughs when you die in-game, because now it's like free to roam the world and whatever that would entail. But there must be a way, in theory at least, seeing as multiple intensely powerful mages thought they could have owned it. Unfortunately for them, but fortunately for the people of the Empire, Umbraketh was defeated by the Soul of Conflict, and now nobody gets the Umbraketh. But now let's take a view at everything we've talked about, and try to piece together some vague notion of an idea. This might sound a little ridiculous, but I think kind of the whole point of Yeagar's plans was to make Umbraketh. Listen, yes, I'm trying to tie the entire main plot of the first game into an obscure spin-off, but listen. Yeagar couldn't have just killed the Emperor and declared himself ruler. Even as a powerful mage and probable lich, he could not possibly win against the entire Empire that would have been at his doorstep if he tried to pull that. Now, I do think that the end goal of all of this was still for him to be the supreme ruler of Tamriel. But it's not as if he could keep pretending to be Uriel forever. I mean, Uriel was stuck in a plane of oblivion where time moves slowly so he wouldn't die for hundreds of years, but it'd be kind of weird to the people of the Empire if Uriel's septum just never died and kept living for 100 years. So clearly, this was kinda on a clock. So what I'm proposing is that Yeagar Tharn knew he'd eventually need to drop the illusion magic, and he'd need a trump card to establish his own rule as himself. And as I said before, what good is it to be an all-powerful ruler of an entire continent if everything is shit and nobody is listening to you because they're all at war with each other? That's why I think he purposefully let the Empire start to fall apart, to create the environment that would allow the creation of something like Umbraketh, so that he could get his hands on it and use it as a weapon. And that's why I think him not getting Umbraketh is what led to Battlespire a year later. You know, the Eternal Champion is closing in on you. They've been out there for 9 years at this point. They're not slowing down, and now the weapon you've been planning to use to establish yourself this entire time has slipped between your fingers. So you freak out a bit and decide to let Mehrunes Dagon sack the entire Battlespire and destroy it forever so you can kill off some of those few people who could still threaten you while you're busy trying to stamp out the Eternal Champion, because you're running out of options. Now, I might be looking into 3 semi-related events and trying to make them have deeper ties than they really do, but I think this is a neat little idea. Anyway, this video is over, and you should follow my art social medias because I make cool art. I mean, boom, take a look at this. Why did I snap in the recording? Okay, whatever, this video's over.